All right, you should be good to go now.
Okay. I would like to welcome you all to the Thursday, February 27th, 2025 meeting on the Bellingham Planning Board. Before we get on with the agenda, I'd like to ask Phil to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We have a rather robust agenda tonight, so it could be a long night. First item we have is a continued public hearing on Prospect Hill Village. This is for transportation.
Yeah, actually, before we do that,
Yeah.
there's the continued public hearing for 123 Mendon Street. That one, they've requested a continuance.
Okay, yeah.
So I don't know if anybody's here for that. I know there weren't abutters at the first meeting, but they requested a continuance to March 27th while the peer review is getting worked out. If we could just continue that.
Okay.
And we're good with the decision deadline.
Ask for a second.
Second, Bill.
We have a motion on the floor, made and seconded. Continuation of the public hearing for 123 Linden Street to March 27th. Any discussion? Saying none, I'll call for the vote.
Brian, I.
Bill, aye.
Bill, I.
Steve, aye.
That motion passes unanimously.
Now. you can continue.
Now we can talk about,
Prospect Hill Village.
continue public hearing for Prospect Hill Village. Tonight is one topic. I want to remind you of this, transportation. So Rob, can you bring us up to speed on where we are?
Sure. So Bob Esho is actually online. He's our peer review consultant. Good evening, Bob. Thank you for joining.
Great, thank you. Good evening, board members.
Thank you.
So just to kind of get everybody up to speed, there was a traffic peer review that was conducted for Lou's traffic engineer, Kimley Horn, Bill Scully, who's also here. That was dated December 6th. And we received in January, I believe, the revised plan set, and then in February, Kimley Horn ended up issuing a response letter and some additional information in response to the traffic peer review. And that had been submitted to MDM. I think Bob actually had a chance to review. He issued his second peer review letter actually today. I didn't get that into your drop boxes because it just came in earlier this afternoon, but I figured we can discuss where we're at right now with, with the traffic peer review. I believe Kimley Horn has actually prepared a presentation to give, and we all, like I said, we have our peer review consultant, so just talking about traffic this evening. So that's the update, Mr. Chair, if you'd like to proceed as you.
Turn it over to the applicant.
Yeah, thank you very much. Rob.
Pull the slide.
Yeah. Chairman, may I ask one question? Do we only have 4 members tonight, or is,
Correct.
That is correct.
and you do the Mullen rule?
Correct.
We'll do them all.
Okay.
Yeah, you're covered with that.
Okay, thank
I
you.
would suspect that'll be done next week,
Okay, great, thank
and
you.
we'll have the documentation for that.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. My name is Bill Scully with Kimley Horn.
I just took one moment for people in the audience. There's screens behind us and screens behind me. You want to see the presentation? Yep.
Right, so, tonight I'm going to, can you go to the next slide?
Sure.
So, I'm going to summarize a bit of the traffic analysis that we did for the project. I'll go through the findings, the data, and also results and conclusions, and I'll touch a little bit upon the peer review and response to that, and really the major comment on that one, and then I'm sure Bob will have some time to report, summarize his report anyways. Next slide. So, again, everyone pretty much knows the project at this point. It's a residential project, 156 housing units. They're attached single family style. Bordered in general by Prospect Street and Lake Street with 2 access points, 1 to Prospect, 1 to Lake. We began studies on this project back in, I believe, 2022. We're providing some assistance on locating one of the drives on Prospect Street when some of the frontage lots were being developed. And that continued over time in 2023, and then as changes occurred with the design of the project, then we updated that analysis in 2024. And here we are. Next slide. So the purpose of conducting a traffic impact and access study is to understand the characteristics of the abutting street system that we're going to tie into. There's always obviously the question of, well, how much traffic is that project going to generate? So estimating that potential site related traffic, evaluating the access to and from the site. And then in the end, as part of our work, we may identify either some on-site or off-site actions that we would suggest for managing traffic or managing traffic safety, enhancing safety in that relationship. And that's where you'll see proposed mitigation or proposed recommendations. And I'll touch on them later in the presentation. Next slide. So the process that we follow is pretty standard. It's well-defined process at this point in time. Methods I described that we follow by the Institute of Transportation Engineers, or ITE. And MassDOT has either accepted those procedures or expanded on them or given more guidance. And so we try to use both their process and ITE's, and we rely on other guidelines as well as we go through the project. We define a study area typically, and then a set of data collection is a major phase. We'll collect traffic volumes, we'll collect traffic speeds, we'll look at crash experience, and I say visibility up there, but we'll go out and actually measure site distances as they relate to the site drives. And then the next step really is the forecast. So we look into the future, both with and without the project. We look at historical growth, projected growth, identify other projects in the area that are either in process or underway, or depending on where they are in the time frame. And then we'll also look at where are those projects and do we expect any of that traffic from those projects to come past the site, and then determine if they're part of the background growth or we build them directly in. And then in the end, we'll compare the future no build with the future build to determine that incremental impact of the project and also any changes that would be anticipated. And then from there, it's drawing conclusions, summarize some findings, and then identifying, as I said before, any potential actions that relate to traffic and access that would come into play, and we'd make that recommendation to the applicant and potentially work with the site engineer as they're designing internally. And then in this case also, then there was peer review by MDM, and so we reviewed that set of comments and prepared a response to it. And like I said, I'll touch on one of their major requests or major comment of that review. Next slide. So the overall project area, so that our orange circle is the site. And you can see Prospect Street's labeled, Lake Street's labeled. The red circle, the open circle is the intersection of Prospect with Lake Street, which was our study intersection for impact. I've also shown in this aerial where Route 140 is and I-495. Next slide. So I'm gonna touch on Prospect and Lake Street. One of probably the more significant question or comment from MDM pertained to Route 140 at Maple and South Maple, and having an assessment of what the project might do on that intersection. So I'm not gonna talk about that until the end. But anyway, so Prospect Street, this is just a quick picture of it. It's 2 lanes. In this area, it's 30 mph posted speed. This is under Franklin jurisdiction, but then it crosses into Bellingham and it turns into South Maple Street up to 140. The weekday volumes that we used and measured are about 9,300 vehicles over the course of 24 hours. And the average speed is that we measured was 40 mph up here. And I think there is a little, there's 30 mph posted, but I've also seen noted 40 mph posted as well. But that's average speed is 40 mph based on our measurements. And where we measured were north of the project site on Prospect Street. So as you do get towards Lake Street, most of the traffic at Lake Street is coming southbound, turn right, or coming out of Lake Street and turn left towards 140. And traffic just generally starts to slow down between these homes and Lake Street. Next slide. So Lake Street, so that we looked at that a little bit more as the project changed in design with an access point onto Lake. Originally, there was no direct access to Lake, but 2 access points on Prospect Street. Again, Lake Street is 2-lane road, 30 mph posted. This Lake Street is under town of Bellingham jurisdiction. And if you continue, I guess it would be south or west, you tie in with Pulaski Boulevard. The measured volume on this, we counted last fall, was about 7,000 vehicles over the 24-hour period. Average speeds where we counted and observed was a little bit south or west of the project site. And the average speed there was 27 miles an hour.
Next slide.
Next slide. Yeah. You can go to the next slide because this is very really touched on that. So in the report, we projected site traffic for the development. It's based on the ITE trip models, which are based on actual observations of developments similar in character as this in terms of single family attached type of units. Based on that, so we do a weekday projection, but we're really focused our analysis on the AM peak hour and the PM peak hour. Those typically are your worst traffic conditions during the day on the streets, because you have your commuter traffic and in the morning it's commuters, maybe school related traffic. In the afternoon it's commuters, and then other related traffic occurring. So we focus on that. During the AM peak hour, we're projecting 19 trips entering the site and 56 trips exiting the site. In the PM peak hour, we're projecting 53 vehicle trips entering and then 37 exiting. Normally, as everyone knows, in a residential development, the morning period, most people are leaving sites, going to work, going going to the schools and, not necessarily coming back into the site. In the afternoon, peak direction is everyone's coming back home. Next slide. So then the next step of forecast for the project is we've got how many trips are gonna be generated. Now we get to, we estimate, okay, where are they coming from in terms of direction? So again, this aerial shows, north and south of the site. It includes Lake Street, Prospect Street to the south, and then up towards the 140 area. We looked at, census-related information of work trip. Where do workers who live in Bellingham tend to work by community? And then when you see that, then you start to determine a typical route, a likely route that would take place. We also looked at some of the other studies in the region, in the town that have gone through the process to see where they were forecasting as well. So you had like Curtis Hill Apartments on 140, you had a couple of others. And in the end, we projected 85% of our traffic would head towards 140 to the north. And once they get to 140, then they're doing a lot of different things. They're either heading towards 495 to go north. They could be going to commuter rail station in that direction, or they're continuing on Maple up to 126. Or they're taking a left towards, working their way towards Bellingham Center and out towards the Mendon, Milford area. We projected 10% would go south on Prospect Street towards Washington Street and ultimately King Street and Franklin, and 5% would head down Lake Street. Next slide. So in the end, we take our projections and we add that to the no build conditions. So we've taken existing conditions, we project out into the future. We add in like Curtis Hill Estates, Bungee Hill, and Lakeshore that, and another one, I forget off the top of my head. But we build all of that into the flow. We saw from existing studies where that traffic was gonna come down Lake and on Prospect and go through that intersection or past our site. So we added all that in. We added another background growth of 1% per year on top of that. And then, so that gives us our no build condition, and then we take that and add in all of our site traffic. So that 75 trips in the morning or 90 trips in the PM peak, we add that in, and then we end up in an analysis stage of looking at site drives as well as the intersection of Lake Street and at Prospect Street. If you look through our analysis, the analysis showed motorists are going to be able to enter and exit the site pretty efficiently, short delays. And again, most of the traffic is going to and from the north. So coming home in the PM peak, you're taking a right turn into the site, so it doesn't have that much of an impact there. We did look at how the site design is laid out and where the homes are inside the site, where we began to assign, okay, how many do we think will go out the Lake Street Drive versus the Prospect Street Drive? We took all that into account. Both drives operate fine. And the analysis also showed minimal impact on the Prospect Street, Lake Street intersection. So yes, we're adding some traffic to it, but again, in that direction, we've got 5% of the forecast that we're projecting down Lake Street, or 10% into Franklin on Prospect Street. So the actual increase in traffic through that intersection is relatively small. It doesn't change the operating conditions. We measured site distance at both site drives as well as that intersection. The site distance criteria is easily satisfied. And that's based on actual visual and then taking into account the speeds on the roadway. And the site distance at Prospect and Lake Street in general, are satisfied with an exception of if you've ever gone out of that intersection. You stopped on Lake Street and you're looking left towards 140. The road grade off on the roadside goes up a little bit. There's some vegetation, maybe some boulders along the side. So that can affect your visual leaving Lake Street. There's no effect approaching Lake Street. You can see it pretty well. And what we've said in our recommendations, though, it'd be nice to clear that rounding and level it to road grade and trim the vegetation, and I'll talk about that in a little bit more. Fire truck apparatus, so we've been going through, working with the chief, in terms of what trucks he wants tested and where he wants things tested. So we've done all of that analysis, and I'll illustrate that in a minute. But we've shown that the fire trucks can enter and exit the site. The design internally can accommodate the fire trucks. Internally, there's some circles or roundabout type designs to change direction, and it also becomes sort of traffic counting internally. All of those were tested with fire trucks, and the fire truck can move around them as well. Peer review, and again, I'll talk about 140 in South Maple. That was the major comment in general, and I don't want to put words in Bob's mouth, but in general, they found that we followed standard procedures and methods. They had some questions, wanted some clarifications, and then, as I said, the biggest question in my mind was, looking at the 140 and the Maple Street intersection. Next slide. So I'm just gonna go through these very quick, but the blue path is the fire truck apparatus. So this slide and the next slide show the fire truck moving through the site, moving around the circles. Anything that the chief wanted tested, we've done. And I don't think, I think basically we've worked with GLM and Rock Trucks, for a million years. So we've gotten down to if he's doing certain things, he knows where we're going to test, and we didn't really have to change anything internally. But as we've worked together, and the design was going to be done to accommodate. Next slide. Next slide just shows that the Lake Street side, a little blow up of that, but all of this is in the follow-up memo, the response memo to the peer review, as well as I believe a lot of it is in the original report as well. Next slide. This just sightline illustrations at the two site drives. This is at Prospect Street in the site drive where we have more than 400 feet in both directions, approaching and leaving. It's pretty wide open. Next slide. Lake Street, you have a little bit less in one direction going to, I'll get the directions, going west. But you've got more than, you meet the site distance criteria. As I said, the average speed was 27 miles an hour, the post is 30, we tested 30, and it was satisfied. We even tested 35 on Lake Street, and it satisfied that as well. And come from the other direction, you have plenty of site distance.
Next slide.
All right, so 140 Maple. So the question was, well, you didn't look at that. How come? So first reason is it's about a mile away from the project. And when we first set the scope up, we didn't know we were gonna find and make an estimate and forecast 85% of our traffic going in that direction. So it was fine. It was a good comment, good question. We went back in the response and then analyzed this intersection, running through the same exact process that we did at Lake Prospect or our site drive. So we projected out in the future. We added in all the traffic that was already added into ours, but most of them, like for example, Curtis Hill Estates, more traffic's going to go through this intersection than past our site. So we added all that in and then ran an analysis of it. This photo shows what the intersection looks like now. The long-range Route 140 corridor study that the town had BSC do a couple of years ago basically recommended this layout for the intersection, and I know it's been, sort of tweaked or built out in pieces over the years, and now it's basically built out to probably as much as you can do. And it's exactly what the Route 140 corridor study recommended for the intersection. Anyways, we analyzed it. While we do have a lot of our traffic going through it, it's gonna be spread. So coming up South Maple, you're gonna have some of our traffic in the left, going through, going right, so it spreads that impact. And the analysis showed that on an overall basis, we're not gonna change the level of service at that intersection between no build and build. And that northbound approach where that becomes our critical movement is gonna continue to operate at level service C, which is more than acceptable in the peak hours. Again, between no build and build. Let's see, next slide. Again, in concluding, we know we can have safe, efficient access and egress to the project via the 2 site drives. The site is designed to accommodate the fire apparatus movement. We will have some impact on the 140 intersection, but it's gonna be pretty small impact, not change anything. And we did, though, with all that, we did develop some recommendations for action. Some of them are fairly standard at the site drive. Some of them relate to the intersection of Lake and Prospect. Next slide. So this just lists them. So stop control on our site drives, which is a normal, typical. Maintain clear visibility. We've got this adequate site distance added drives, but it's important to maintain it over the years. I think in the peer review, MDM requested some sightline triangles be shown on the site plan that's ultimately approved by the board. And within that sightline triangle, you maintain your vegetation, keeping it either low line or set back, cut back, and then you wouldn't put any major signage within that sightline triangle that could potentially block visibility. We did recommend having a speed feedback sign on Prospect Street, and the one that we recommended, it would be dealing with southbound traffic coming down from 140. You'd have the feedback sign between our site and 140, somewhere in the middle there, trying to slow traffic down before they get too far down Prospect Street. As I said, the intersection at Lake and Prospect, people are, the bulk of the movement is right turn in the southbound direction and left turn coming out of Lake. So traffic is already starting to slow down to make those moves. The one thing about Lake and Prospect is if you're out there anytime, certainly in the summer and the fall, sometimes you can lose the intersection a bit because of the trees and the leaves and the vegetation. So we put some recommendations in related to that in terms of either advanced signage. There's potentially using instead of just a stop sign, you could have a stop sign with LED border of light flashing so that someone coming up Lake Street can't miss the stop sign. Or you can do some other things as well. Just again, to make sure everyone sees the intersection. There's some, and I guess next slide, Rob, is this one's a little tough to see. It's in the responses a little bit clearer. So right now,
I have the full, let me stop sharing this and I'll pull up the actual plan itself.
okay, it's a little bit clearer, but so on Lake Street, I don't know when, but the town put in an advanced warning sign, like stop ahead sign. as you're heading towards Prospect Street. Um, it's really a non-standard sign that they put, so, we've recommended making, one that's more compliant with our traffic engineering standards approach to that, so everyone knows, it just becomes more standard, for the stop ahead. We also recommended, and again, it's a complicated intersection because the town of Bellingham owns basically Lake Street. And if you look at that plan, everything going up to the top side of the page, Franklin owns Prospect Street and certainly going to the left side of the page. And then in the middle, it's owned by a private homeowner on the corner there. So somewhere along the line, I forget the year, but instead of having that wide layout that it shows up with that dark black border line, the intersection was modified. And again, I don't know the full history of it, but they got permission from the property owner to make Lake Street come in as a 90-degree T intersection. But the property owner still owns the middle, the land to the right of Lake Street. So it's kind of so a lot of the actions, we've outlined a bunch of actions. Some are gonna be, town of Bellingham can say yay or nay, yeah, we want a LED stop sign at the stop line, or the advanced warning sign meeting current standards. Anything on the Franklin side, like coming towards Lake Street, we recommended, again, more warning. It's a lower volume approach. But you can come around one of the corners and all of a sudden you're at Lake Street. So, again, just making sure everyone knows there's an intersection there. We've even suggested potentially coming northbound on Prospect Street, maybe consider making that a stop as well. So you'd have basically two approaches be stopped, but that would require Franklin thinking that was a good idea. Let's see, I think that's it for me, right?
Yeah, that was the second to last slide, which the last slide, I think was just saying, thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, so I'll be happy to try to answer any questions, and I know you want to hear from your peer review consultant too.
What I think I'd like to do is hold off the questions until we hear from Bob.
Yeah.
So we have more information to gauge our questions on. Bob, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you, Board Chair and board members. For the record, Robert Michaud, Managing Principal of MDM Transportation Consultants. We were retained to represent the town's interests, the planning board's interests in this particular project. We issued peer review commentary initially on December 6th and subsequently on February 26th, today. Actually, it was submitted today, but it's dated to the 26th. And that second review really addresses some of the remaining comments or clarifications that came out of the subsequent applicant response. The applicant's engineer, Kimley Horn, had submitted initial review to, or rather response to our comments in a letter dated to February 20th. So really what I'd like to do is focus on that set of comments. I think as Mr. Scully, Bill Scully had indicated, our overall finding in the review is that the studies have been conducted to a good industry standard. We concurred with many of the methodologies and outcomes of the analysis that were presented in the originally submitted study. But we focused principally on a couple of areas, one of which Bill mentioned earlier. That was whether or not the study area should have been extended to include the Route 140 intersection, which is the first major intersection that you come to and where the bulk of the traffic for the project would be going to or coming from. We concluded, based on the applicant's response and the fact that the intersection has been fairly recently updated as of 2020, that the relative impact of the project there was inconsequential to the operations of the intersection. However, we do note that with additional growth as things move into the future, growth far beyond what this particular project is going to be adding to it, that there will be a point in time when that signal has to be optimized so that it's working as efficiently as it possibly can. That's a typical maintenance item for any signal in the Commonwealth. The analysis that was presented clearly show that particularly during weekday evening peak hours in the westbound direction as people are coming back from 495, that the delays can be rather long for that particular approach at that time of day. So the intersection is not perfect, but the relative impact of the does does not warrant any specific action, in our opinion, as a result of the type and volume of traffic that they would be adding to it. The second major comment really had to do with the Lake and Prospect Street intersection. That is, as Bill had mentioned, it's a rather complicated intersection because of the ownership entities that relate to it. Partly Bellingham, partly private, partly Franklin. The issue, as Bill points out, is that sightline issue as you look to the left when you're attempting to turn from Lake Street. We had recommended, and the applicant has committed to improving that sight line by providing some vegetative clearing on that corner. And secondly, to improve the maneuverability within the intersection, particularly for vehicles turning right onto Lake Street, where there's clear evidence that vehicles will sometimes have to climb over the edge of the pavement to make a proper turn onto that roadway. The conceptual plan that Bill had, we generally concur with. There are elements of that that relate to sign improvements, all of which should be MUTCD compliant. That's what they're proposing to do. We concur with the types and locations of signs that were indicated. The signs that are on Prospect Street will require approval from the town of Franklin. And certainly because it's a different jurisdiction, only limited say that Bellingham would have in that matter, but we don't believe that Franklin would necessarily have an issue with the placement of those types of signs. I think that's a fairly straightforward process. As it relates to the corner rounding, applicant has shown in auto turn analysis that with that corner improvement, the radius improvement, that emergency vehicle apparatus can much more easily negotiate that corner, which is a good thing. We have conducted our own set of auto turn analysis that corroborates that finding. We've also tested additional vehicle types, including a box truck type vehicle, which would be common to see there. That design vehicle would work much better under that improvement. A WB-40 or tractor trailer, we tested that, also works well without encroachment to opposing lanes. Larger commercial vehicles, the larger tractor trailers, would continue to have encroachment issues, quite frankly. And while we were conducting field review, we actually did see a very large tractor use that intersection. So that's a pre-existing issue. It will certainly be made better and safer as a function of the proposed improvement, but it won't entirely solve that particular issue. As it relates to that improvement will require sign off, if you will, or a grant of easement from the private landowner as it relates to improving the corner in what we believe to be a privately owned corner of the parcel. I don't know what the history of Lake Street alignment is, but that portion of Lake Street does appear to be within privately controlled property. It is not within the designated town layout that was on the prior improvement plan. As a practical matter, I think it's a fairly straightforward improvement. And I believe so long as the applicant in good faith and with diligence pursues a notice and an acknowledgement by the landowner that they can make those improvements. That should be fairly straightforward. We would recommend, however, that the materials of construction, the sub-base material, the paving material be specified at some point to ensure that the durability of that rounding, that corner radius improvement is sufficient for the types of vehicles that are likely to use it. We just don't want to see a situation where there's rutting or degradation of roadway surface shortly after the improvement. We want to make sure that that's designed and built to a good heavy-duty pavement standard. And finally, as it relates to the sightline issue, the selective vegetative clearing is a good idea. We believe would not entail major tree cutting, but rather selective trimming of vegetation and trees and limbs within the sightline triangle of that particular corner. Again, would require landowner notification, but we do not believe that it's an onerous request. We would hope in good faith that the proponent pursue, that acknowledgement from the private landowner to effect those improvements. Those were the most significant comments in our review. I think in conclusion, we find that all of the submitted materials have been responsive to our comments. We believe that proper access is being provided to the facility, that it is designed to accommodate emergency access and circulation to an appropriate degree. All clarifying questions we've posed have been answered, and I will readily answer any questions that the board might have. Thank you.
Thank you very much. What I'd like to do is I'm gonna flip it a little bit right now. We usually make comments after the presentation. What I'd like to do is, I think it's important that we hear from the public first. You live here, you deal with this every day. So I would like to turn it over to the public with a couple of conditions. We asked to rotate the questions, so one person does not monopolize the questions. And only ask the same question, no more than twice. So we can give everyone else an opportunity to ask a question. And your comments should be directed to the board, not toward the applicant, in fairness to the applicant and to the board. And then afterwards, we'll have some comments. I've looked around, I see all of us have written notes down. So we'll have a lot of comments to make. I suspect our comments may be very similar to yours. And that'll give us an opportunity to echo those comments when it's our time to ask questions. So what I'd like to do now is turn over the public. And open for questions. Yes, ma'am, in the front. Can you state your name and address?
Yes, Marty Cross, 49 Lakeview Avenue. I have a question about the distance between Cross Street and when you turn left onto Lake Street, the distance to the access point to the project.
Okay,
I couldn't see. I don't know if you can go back to the slide that shows that.
I don't know if that will give us a
Okay.
nice, a good barometer for it.
There are many
But we
homes,
can
so I'm
Trying to figure it out.
changes in elevation.
Yep. If we don't have it now, we will get it for you.
Yeah, I can take a look. If you want to take another question, maybe, if you have any other questions while I look that up.
Any other questions? No one else? Gentlemen, the back,
Ritual Marks, 13 Sandcastle. Just the numbers regarding the number of vehicles, I believe was the slide.
yes, sir. You want us to go back to that?
Yeah, if you wouldn't mind.
All right, that question's gonna be delayed a little bit more.
We don't have to, but.
No, I'll pull
I
it
guess-
up, don't
I guess
worry.
my question was, we know how many units, is that based on the number of occupants for those units? And then how is that calculated?
I think both the, experts can answer that.
Based on the number of units.
Okay,
So, so
and
the models are developed by observing actual developments. And they come up with trip rates, and a trip rate in this case would be trip per unit. And that was the basis.
okay. Bob, you're in agreement?
Yes, and it's a common question that's asked of these types of projects. At more than 150 units, folks, generally try to correlate how much traffic that really means. And we do concur with the estimates, the trip estimates. They were done using a good industry standard. And we also, MDM that is, have access to empirical information for projects just like this at various locations in the Commonwealth, in Massachusetts, that are now built. We go back after the fact and measure their performance, and they're highly consistent with these types of estimates that are presented here. It's important to note that these are a snapshot in time. These are estimates that occur over the course of a 1 hour period in either the morning or the afternoon. What that really means is that that's not all of the traffic that occurs from these types of projects. That's a snapshot of a 1 hour period during which the highest level of trip activity would occur. If you look at the shoulder hours to a typical commute, they could start as early as 6 in the morning if you're a nurse or a service provider. You might have to get an earlier start, whereas the more traditional office worker might leave at 7:30 or 8 in the morning. Or if you're a lab worker or a scientist and you work strange hours, you might leave later in the morning and into the night. So usually what is best to understand is that these are not all of the trips that are going to occur from all of the units. This is a snapshot of a 1 hour period in the morning and 1 hour afternoon period. And we find that these estimates are reasonable and consistent with our own practice and observations for similar projects in Massachusetts.
Thank you. Hope that answered your question,
It
sir.
does, thank you.
Going back to that other question.
Certainly.
This, it's a distance, so. Move this out of the way. So. Here's the intersection of Prospect Street and Lake Street. Here's Cross Street, so. This is approximate, but, yeah, about a little over 1,100 feet to the end, the proposed entrance on Lake Street.
Almost a quarter of a mile.
Yeah.
So that's 1 or 2/10 of a mile.
About a quarter of a mile.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. It's four houses.
So that area floods and the water comes over Lake Street. So will elevation, I mean, if trucks enter the site, it has to be a fairly big access point.
I know we want to stay more on the traffic related
Okay.
items, but if you don't mind, if I can kind of answer. So
Absolutely.
there are site plans that Lou ended up submitting for that access. And there is grading in that area. There's actually a swale that's proposed. So there are items. I don't want to get too much into the weeds because we want to talk about traffic tonight, but
Thank you so much.
yeah, we can discuss it more at, the next meeting.
Any other question? from the audience? Yes, sir.
It's on Morel 513 Lake Street. The data that was collected in that traffic study, if I understand that right, it's a 1 hour snapshot at different times of the day, is that correct?
Correct.
What, that was 2022, it was collected?
So the intersection was counted in, May of 2023. For the morning and the afternoon peak hours, so we do 2 hour counts in that morning time period and 2 hours in the afternoon. And then within those 2 hour periods, we pick the peak 60 minutes, that occurs within that time frame. On top of that, we had 48 hours of data, on Prospect Street collected, and that was done May of 23, and then we also counted that again somewhere, I think in June of 24, I want to say. And then on Lake Street in September 24, we did 48 hours of more data.
That was it, you just answered my last one, what the months were, you know.
So we've had some of it done fairly recently.
What's that?
We've had some of it done fairly recently.
Okay, okay, yeah, that was it, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, I'd like to turn over to the board. I'm gonna start with Phil.
Yeah, this question's for Robert. Did you get it? One of the things that I was surprised at was the 8510 north-south number that was being used. Did you get a chance to pressure test that one out? And what, you know, I heard some of the logic, but did you go through some of the logic in more detail? I was
Sure.
knowing that the northern exit is a larger intersection than if they go south. They go south, then you end up, you know, down to 495 as well, down Prospect, down to King Street, down onto 495, that southern path. And I guess I was kind of surprised it was only 10% would go south on that. Did you get a chance to pressure test that at all?
Yeah, so we did ask the applicant to provide the supporting what's known as a gravity model. What that model does is it looks at the employment centers for folks who live in Bellingham, and based on that likely location of employment, would attempt to connect the dots, if you will, between the site and those employment centers using the least time path trip assignment. So in other words, if you went to Google Mapping and you typed in an employment location of Framingham, for instance, you would have a likely path that minimizes the amount of time it would take to get from this development to that employment center and vice versa. So they've gone through that and they've identified about 10 communities that represent the bulk of employment locations for folks in Bellingham. And they, for each one of those communities, identified a likely route based on that process. And they've come up with that 85-15 split, which we find to be reasonable on the basis of, again, the employment densities and where people are likely to be headed during those commuter periods. Now, traffic engineering is not necessarily a hard science in terms of routes that people select. There could be some variability in that percentage, but based on the number of trips that are projected from the development, less than 60 peak direction trips, that 85-15 split, if it were any different, if it were 80-20 or 75-25, would not result in a material difference in the number of trips that were being assigned to the various intersections. So we find that what they've done, from a scientific standpoint, if you will, is appropriate. It's commonly used as a method to estimate that distribution, and understanding, the level of traffic that would be added here. We don't find that, reasonable variation from those percentages would result in any different finding in the traffic report.
Okay. I was concerned about, people heading towards the 95, 495 area, the Route 1 area, and those types of things. Were those part of the communities that
They were, yeah, so
Any
the,
type of employee?
yeah, the communities included, Bellingham, Franklin, Milford, Holliston, Foxborough, Walpole, Plainville, Rentham. There were communities within that mix that included those employment centers would be inclined to use 95. And I think again, while some of those percentages are subject to variability, not substantial variability.
About queue time down and heading south there onto Prospect Street, down onto King Street. Granted, that's that's Franklin. But
Right.
past there all the time, and there's a large backup of cars sitting there all the time. Is that a intersection that's of concern because of this project?
Well, again, the typical standard that you'd use to determine which intersections and areas to study would have to do with the level of change in volume. And the guidance there would say, locations that sustain an impact or a change in volume of 100 vehicles an hour or 5% change in overall volume could be appropriate locations for study. That more southerly location, study location wouldn't meet those criteria. So it was not included in the study. We didn't see a need to have that included in the study on the basis of the volume of traffic that was being generated.
How does
It
queue
doesn't
time
mean
play
that
into that? How does queue time
the,
play into that? If it adds queue time, if you get
yeah,
5 cars lined up all the time.
yeah, the analysis it depends on how much volume, additional volume is being added, right? And if an approach, as you point out, has a delay, a queue of 4, 5, 6 cars, and you're adding one additional car every 3 to 4 minutes, it's not going to make a material difference in what that queue looks like, right? That queue is going to ebb and flow. So you'd only start to see a meaningful change in the queue or the delay at an intersection where you have, volumes that start to approach 100 vehicles an hour or 5% change overall. And this project really doesn't rise to that level. So it really wouldn't be a candidate in our view for a detailed study, at least for project.
How about the Lake and Prospect turn from Lake Street on Prospect heading north? And
Yeah.
that street, because if
In
that one I
terms-
know from personal experience, you know.
Yeah.
I worry about adding more volume there, coming out of the development, heading north or south, and then just gumming up that intersection. That's the one that you're looking to add some.
Right. So the orientation of units on the property is going to dictate how much traffic is likely to use Lake Street there. The vast majority of the units that are within this development are actually oriented more toward the Prospect Street driveways. On quick view of the plan, which I have before me, there are 3, 6, 9, to about a dozen, maybe 15 units that are oriented closer to the Lake Street driveway, where the bulk and the vast majority of the rest of the units would be more directly served by getting to or from Prospect directly. So those 15 units, on an hourly basis, we're talking about a trip increase of maybe 5 to 7 vehicles using Lake Street. It's a vehicle every 10 minutes on average that would be inclined to be using Lake Street. So it's not likely to be a high volume, not enough to materially change the amount of delay or queues. And I think their analysis actually shows that. Not saying it doesn't back up once in a while. That happens just about everywhere in the Commonwealth these days. But this project is not likely to make that situation worse. I think that the more critical issue from our standpoint is one of safety, and that has to do with the sight line and the ability for vehicles to properly maneuver through the intersection because of its constrained sight line, and because, as Bill even pointed out, it's easy to miss that intersection. If you're not familiar with it, you can go right through the intersection and realize, gee, I should have made a right turn there. So I think the signs that are being proposed will make that intersection a bit more evident. It will elevate the prominence and knowledge that motorists have that, yes, there's an intersection coming up. And the geometric improvement, I think, will make a big difference in terms of just day-to-day use, and safety.
So did I hear correctly that you were thinking that without radius improvements to that intersection, there would be an issue?
Well, there's evidence now, I think there's remnants of a bumper that are along that edge of road. I think vehicles, if they're not careful in maneuvering onto Lake Street on that right turn, would be faced with the remnants of a wall, and some debris on that corner that make it difficult and challenging to turn without turning into the opposing lane, frankly. So I think in the absence of a corner rounding or improvement, that we would be concerned that at least for certain vehicle types, that there could be circumstances where a larger vehicle might need to sweep wide into the opposing lane. So it's not a good situation. And so we would highly recommend that type of improvement be done.
And how often would you recommend that intersection if the landowner was willing to be involved with it, be cut back and maintained? What type of a process would that include?
I think it's a fairly straightforward process. I think the applicant has submitted a conceptual plan showing, the extent of what that widening or curb improvement would look like. We've requested or suggested that the applicant, before any work is done, first secure the landowner agreement to be able to do that work, but to have a plan that very specifically identifies the nature of the materials to be used, right? So the sub-base material or gravel, burrow, and supporting structural elements of that should be identified along with the pavement type and depth, so that there's a clear understanding of what that improvement is actually going to entail. It is not a difficult improvement to implement from a construction standpoint. We would, if our firm were involved with that, what we would do is develop a specific plan based on survey with showing materials of construction, geometry, and notes that a contractor could use to construct the improvement. The actual implementation, once that plan were provided, it's something that could probably be done within a few days.
How much maintenance would have to be done on that? Is that an annual, semi-annual, 5 years, 10 years, 20?
I think as it relates to the corner improvement, once that section was properly paved, if it were designed with the appropriate sub-base and top course materials for asphalt, shouldn't have to do anything with it for many years, 10 or more years. But the larger issue is the sight line, the vegetation that blocks the sight line. That's something that would need to be regularly maintained. And that's a common maintenance item in many communities. In this case, it's somewhat unique because of the private land ownership on that corner. But that's something that the proponent, if they were able to secure an agreement from the landowner for entry to their property, could easily achieve.
I think that's where I want to go for now.
Okay.
My question is with regard to the intersection at Prospect and Lake. But first I wanted to ask, you had mentioned that the average speed on Prospect was at 40 miles an hour. Do you know how close to that intersection that speed was actually taken?
I can get that information for you.
I
It was
would-
probably 1,000 feet or more to the north.
Okay.
So it was more in the sort of the free flow street section. was prior to where the proposed site drive on Prospect was originally developed.
Okay. All right. And then I've traveled those streets for over 40 years. So I know taking a left onto Prospect Street from Lake, the only way you can do that currently is to put your nose out in the middle of the traffic. And by then it's too late. So, and many times I've gotten the single finger wave, you know, trying to pull out of there. So do we know what the sight line is now, taking a left versus if this vegetation can be taken down, what that will increase it to?
I don't have a post other than, let's see. Under existing, so approaching the intersection, so that's someone coming down, down Prospect Street, towards the intersection. They will have, it's, looks like it's about, well, 600 feet. But leaving Lake Street and looking left, we measured, about 185, and we would need at least 200 for 30 mile per hour speed. So as Bob mentioned, okay, so there's vegetation, there's also, so you have the road, and then you have a little bit of an up on the side of the road.
Yeah.
So what we've recommended is along that edge, we sort of regrade, so we would level out that roadside by a couple of feet to be at road grade, and then do trimming and cutting back some vegetation. With that, you're gonna have more than 200 feet easily. I'd have to measure it.
Okay.
But
So-
you'd meet the criteria.
So in theory, if this is done, you could actually stop at the intersection without creeping out.
That's
And being able to
that's the
see.
goal. That's the idea. Yes.
Okay, that was it for me.
Oh, I have a couple of questions. So if I'm coming from South Maple going to 140, I'm coming to that intersection of Maple and 140.
Yeah.
What was the spread between left, straight, and right?
Of our estimated volume or currently?
Or both, I guess?
So I don't have them broken out exactly, but really quick addition, I've got of our site traffic. 11 coming up, taking a left. 3 going through, and about 30 going right. In the morning.
That's the sort of the impact. Or the,
That's the additional traffic coming into that intersection.
do you know what the current spread is? Existing condition?
Future projection at that I have here. So that's, again, taking the count data from combination of the 140 corridor study and the Curtis Hill. The apartments up on towards the center, right around the corner. See, what's the name?
Curtis.
Is it Curtis or is it the other one? I don't know. Give me 1 second.
I think the development that would be affected, that would be Curtis or Red Mill on the chart.
I think it's written.
Yeah, which is right
Yeah.
behind
So
here.
I think that one of them was later, and they built off the quarter study, so we took that, and then so I projected out, right? If I project that out, in the no build condition in the morning, you've got 73 taking a left, about 200 going through, and 270 taking a right. In the afternoon, you had, it's about 110 taking a left, about 200 going through, and 140 taking a right. So our percentages won't go exactly like that, because we're projecting based on work trip patterns and communities where they're likely going. So if I'm working in Westboro, I'm gonna take a right, hit the interchange and go 495. If I'm, obviously, if I'm going, working in Holliston, I could go straight through and use 126. So our projections are, our percentages are gonna be a little bit different from existing patterns, because we use more the gravity model approach as opposed to existing patterns.
So if we spin the perspective a little bit and look at the trips, the evening trips. And people are now returning from 495 and they're taking a left down to South Maple. What does that do on that? On that left-hand turn?
Well, we're gonna add about 30 trips to that left turn during the peak hour.
Okay.
So, one added vehicle. Let's see, one added vehicle per 2 minutes. Okay, to that approach. So that left turn, you know, I've driven through that intersection a million times, you know, and it is what it is, and basically it currently exists how everyone, whether it was the corridor study or DOT or new developments coming in over the years, you've got what you have now. And that left turn lane probably is too short, ultimately, going, you know, way into the future. So we're gonna add some traffic to that left turn to the queue. Probably, but again, one vehicle every 2 minutes, so we're not gonna change it that to any great degree. But it probably, you know, I mean, left turn lanes tend to get less time than your through lanes. So that you don't make it through the first light during the peak hour, the first green, you're probably gonna sit there for a little bit. But that said, so you know, we're not. All of our analysis, and again, looking into the future and adding all that traffic in, we're not changing to any great degree. We're not changing the operating condition. And we're not changing that much in terms of added vehicle delay or queues in any particular move.
So maybe this is for Bob. The proposed, clearing mitigation as you travel from, you're on South Maple, you're going south, and you're gonna take a right onto Lake Street. There's the proposed clearing,
Yes.
you know what I'm talking about? What about across Lake Street? That opposite corner. So there's clearing
This,
as we,
right, so that we looked at the sight lines approaching Lake Street from both approach sides of Prospect, and we didn't see that there was a sight line issue in either travel direction. We didn't see that there was a sight line issue as you were looking to the right when you're leaving Lake Street. It really was an issue that was confined to that specific left turn movement, looking to the north, that was the concern. Are you, I'm not sure exactly what you're pointing to as a potential concern, but yeah,
so if I'm on Lake Street, I'm gonna take a left
yes,
onto South Maple and go towards 140. You with me?
yeah, yep. Mhm.
So if I pull up, and like Steve says, you gotta kind of nose out now to see kind of what's going on.
Right.
There's the clearing, the proposed mitigation would be to the left. 'Cause you're taking-
That is correct.
But I was curious about any necessary clearing on the right. Because
Yeah,
for me,
yeah, okay.
when I use that intersection, it's not that easy to see traffic coming from the right.
Right. I know that when we took a look at it, I'm actually on a street level map right now. We have other photos that we've taken in the field. I'm just gonna drop a pin down here. I know that you have the residential use right in the corner. There is a tree there. Um, and there is a utility pole. So uh, you can see between the utility pole and the tree, but certainly I understand what you might be pointing to is that during the summertime period when trees are in full bloom and everything else, you don't have necessarily a free and clear open sight line to that approaching car. It does meet a standard, but there is a tree there that if it were trimmed, would enhance or increase the visibility in that direction. That tree is on private property. It's something that if it could be trimmed with homeowner permission, great. But but it does meet a current standard.
I'm particularly thinking about nighttime as well, because people come around that bend on the Prospect, or
Right.
they come up quick. And you, like Steve said, at least now, you have to edge out to get there, and in my experience, you also have to edge out to look to the right to make sure you're not gonna get from that way as well. So I was wondering if clear should be considered there.
Can I say, build on a little bit of what Bob said. One is we'll go back out and take another look, but our measurements to and from that direction, they exceed even what you would need if someone was coming up from Franklin, from that right, 40 miles an hour. We meet that, and they're not coming, on that approach, they are not coming that fast. I think the edging out you're doing is mostly good. You can see to the right, but that left, you're not sure, what's happening. So one of the things that we mentioned that it'd be nice to do, and just in terms of summertime vegetation, you do lose the intersection. The people on Prospect Street lose the intersection. People on Lake Street, may not even believe there's a stop sign, coming up, that they're coming up to. So there are things that we recommended, and granted, yeah, there was signage, so you gotta pay attention to the signs. But at least they tell someone that something's up ahead. There's other things that can be done, but I don't think, the person living on the corner and the person opposite Lake, want a flashing beacon sitting there. That would really highlight that intersection. There's not a crash history at that intersection, believe it or not, there's not. The rounding that we want to improve upon, is really geared to regrading that strip down Prospect for a sight distance. But you can go out there today and you'll see tire rutting around the corner that some of the larger vehicles are doing. So while we're doing that, we make the rounding better, but you also want to balance, like I don't want, Amazon vans screaming around the right turn because we've made it so good, that they can go fast. So, there is a balance, there's advanced signage, there's things we can talk to Franklin about. I mean, the Prospect Street on the south side is, I live a few miles away in Franklin. If I'm coming through Bellingham, I'm never coming down Washington to Prospect to come over here. I'm coming down 140 to wherever I'm going. So, but that said, maybe the town of Franklin will entertain putting a stop on that approach. So that everyone stop, you stop Prospect coming north, you stop Lake coming into the intersection. The other movement, I don't think you have to, it's mostly right turns anyways, so you could go with a quote two-way stop at that location. And that starts to alleviate your concern of, slowing down traffic on that approach because you'd be stopping. So I think there's a lot. I don't see anything there as just a catastrophic problem that you're facing today, but there's some simple things that you can do to make it a better situation. And this project, we're just not gonna have, I trust my projections. So I just do not believe we're gonna have a lot of site traffic coming through that location. So we're not adding a lot, but I think there's things you can do to fix it.
I guess my next question is for Bob. In terms of, let's assume that the current landowner that straddles that intersection with Lake and Maple doesn't agree to make any changes, to allow any trimming and to allow any changes to his property. What then? What's the?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I don't see any reason that the landowner would have be opposed to what's being proposed, but let's take the worst case option. There is a limited amount of vegetation that exists within the public way, if you will, of Prospect Street. So there's some clearing that could be done, within the legal bounds of public way. Ideally, you'd want to do a bit more than that. But one of the reasons that the proponent is uh, showing these advanced signs, the intersection ahead signs, is that those are the types of features that you would implement in cases where there was limited sight line or sight distance. So I think there's somewhat of a fallback in that if the landowner did not agree to allow access to property for clearing, and all that, there would be appropriate signs and other measures that could be done within the public way that would enhance the current situation and make it better than it currently is. So, in the worst case, the intersection will be made to be more safe than it is today. But clearly you'd wanna do what's on that concept plan, and I don't know why a landowner wouldn't want to see that done because they've got to use that same intersection, right? So I think there's somewhat of a mutual interest in seeing these types of improvements made.
I don't know who those, I don't, maybe the landlord was, oh, he's right there. You haven't expressed necessarily a
I had
willingness.
previously, but I can do it again.
I'm sorry, I didn't follow you.
I've expressed it in previous meetings, but I can do it tonight as well. We don't currently have an interest in granting any easement. I mean, the gentleman mentioned that we don't want to see Amazon trucks screaming around the corner or any vehicles. I have a young daughter, so improving the intersection helps the vehicles, but endangers my family, so.
So Bob, then assuming that those kinds of mitigations aren't possible, perhaps you could, for us, look at existing conditions not being changed very much and other considerations that we should consider.
Sure, we could opine on that. I think what the applicant is proposing to do currently is a good step in the right direction in terms of the advanced signs, intersection ahead signs, they're highly reflective stop signs. Everything brought up to a current sign standard, following good industry practices. I think that's a first really good step. We could certainly think about other types of measures, enhanced pavement markings. There is some amount of clearing that could occur and regrading within public way. So there are a few things that could be done. I think there, as it relates to the vegetative clearing, clearly that's not going to increase vehicle speeds or anything like that. Those are the types of measures that are regularly done at intersections like this, typically through a public works department or an engineering department to ensure that public travel safety, including those that might abut the intersection, are maximized. So I would recommend and highly advocate for at least doing the vegetative clearing. I don't think that hurts anybody. It just helps the physical modifications of that intersection, I think principally are intended to avoid circumstances in which a vehicle needs to sweep wide at the intersection, which is in no one's interest. I do not believe that the corner rounding as it's currently proposed would materially increase speeds on that turn. That's a 90-degree turn from a roadway that has limited width. I think it's probably in the order of a 22-foot roadway in that area. So I don't see that improving that corner would increase travel speeds or degrade safety as a result. I would highly advocate and recommend that it be done, but clearly, if it can't, at a minimum, you'd want to do the signs, perhaps some enhanced markings. You could even consider, and I think Bill mentioned this, LED illuminated stop signs that would be even more visible. So there are a few things that you could do to augment the safety there.
Yeah, can I just,
Yeah, sure.
so, just on, terms of, on this board, that you maybe didn't see. So it's the intersection. And, so all this area in pink is in public layout. Part of it is in Bellingham, some of it's in, maybe in the roadside on Franklin. The line is right here. So I would suggest that we can do most of that vegetative trimming and roadside grading. If we can't do this, which I'm not sure that we can't, you know, the running it, you know, the vehicles that can't make the turn are gonna continue to make the turn like they do now. And you're just digging up the edge of they're off the pavement, the rear wheel or something that's off the pavement. I don't know, and all the signs and things like that that Bob just mentioned, we can do. I don't know if Bellingham sometimes have bylaws that basically say, if at a public intersection, the sight distance is being, constrained by vegetation on a private property, the town has the right to go in and trim that vegetation from a public safety point of view. I don't know if Bellingham has that bylaw. Many towns in the Commonwealth do have it. So that might be something to look at. But again, with the advanced intersection signs, you know, we'd have to, you know, propose some of these in Franklin, which, as Bob said, I mean, they're for traffic safety reasons. So
Franklin has put in recently LED stop signs, like on the corner of Prospect and King Street, Washington King Street, that's gone in the last 7 years.
yeah,
So
so
they
they
are
may,
willing to do
they
that,
may
so-
not have a problem putting a stop sign at this
So
location.
I think we need to see a plan.
Well, so is it a reasonable condition that if this board was to approve this project, that the reasonable condition is that there's approval from Franklin for the mitigation that you've discussed?
I mean, we can't control them, but we can
Well, what-
propose and request, and show them what we want to do.
Right, but if you can't increase the sightline distance and you can't also incorporate the signs that you suggest would make it safer, it's almost a plan B, which isn't as adequate as the sightline improvements, then there's no improvements to this and we're adding cars, right?
Well, let me just say this, though. We know that we can do what's in the pink. We know that. We know that the town owns that, and it's the work that we're proposing that's shown in the pink is 100% in Bellingham. But we know we can do that. You know, whether or not it would be fair for a condition to be put on this project that we absolutely get Franklin's permission, I don't think that would be a fair condition. But we would certainly use our best efforts to do that and make up applications and follow the procedure. And if there's an appeal process that can be followed, we're certainly willing to use all of our efforts to follow that appeal for the final conclusion.
I only know happens in this room, but it seems to me that generically, the town of Franklin is not too receptive to this.
Well, that's exactly what I'm saying, but
Right, so they're not gonna, I don't think they're gonna say, great, we'll do it. So we have no mitigation other than that
But
pink strip.
all I will say is that, there are rules and regulations, and then there's appeal processes that go along with that. They would obviously have to have a legitimate reason to object to it or deny us. Just like a street opening permit or something of that sort where, you're entitled, it's a public way, you're entitled to access, you're entitled to, you have certain rights, in other words. So all I'm just trying to say is that we would pursue whatever aspects of that we would need to pursue to achieve a desirable result.
I don't question your sincerity in pursuing that, I'm just assuming the worst case scenario where nothing
The
happens.
worst case scenario is we build our new intersection through your 1935 layout. That's the worst case scenario.
Yeah.
So the town has control over that, and we certainly have control over it because it's considered a private way right now, and we own to the middle. So we have rights to the middle, and most private ways under the statute allow anybody who abuts the private way to make improvements to it. So that's the worst case scenario. What we're talking about now is, minimal but helpful improvements to the intersection that can be done and can be evaluated for their benefits, after the work is completed. And I personally think that if the elevation, I don't know, you folks have been there, the pavement's at one elevation, the slope of off the road is probably 5 or 6 feet higher. And if that's brought down, you might be able to see through this corner easily because there's no trees growing on that corner.
Yeah.
You can see through that corner. What you can't see is when you're at the intersection looking left because you've got this hill that you have to see through. If that hill was gone and the vegetation was gone, I think you'd evaluate. I mean, I can go in there now and do it if you want me to, and you can judge it for yourself, but, we're not at that point, I don't think, but we certainly can do it.
Thank you.
You have one last question?
Nope.
Okay. I will try to be quick. I think the intersection is critical. Sounds like, and I remembered the landowner before saying he's not open to the idea of working with the applicant, so I think that's critical. I'm gonna mention Franklin from one viewpoint. We talk about best case, worst case scenarios. You make sure they're in agreement that their trucks should get in the event of a fire.
Say that again?
The Franklin Fire Department would have access like Bellingham does.
Yeah, well, the turning analysis that we've provided allows trucks to access, no matter what trucks they are.
Okay, I just want to make sure.
So that turning analysis that Bill had showed on the slide will accommodate any fire truck that
Okay.
is.
I just
I
want to
don't know
make
if they have a truck that's larger than what I'm sure that, there are some ladder trucks now that are, super long, and we've had them in other towns where we've complied with the turning analysis for each roadway that we built, turnarounds and cul-de-sacs and that sort of thing. So, yeah,
Okay. School bus safety. If there's what was to be built, potentially could be students there. We need to look at what the routes will be if and when it's built on school bus safety and how that will impact your traffic study. And when you did your traffic study, was there an exit from the property on the Prospect, or was everything coming onto Lake? So I believe right now we're down to one exit, correct?
No, it's Lake and Prospect.
Okay,
we did in September, when we knew we were going up to Lake, we had them do the traffic analysis
Okay.
and counts on Lake Street.
But in 20, okay,
And we did,
And
by the
prior to
way,
that, we had
I think,
prospects.
Bill, we did it after the school started, so
Okay.
we didn't do it during an off-peak, time of year, say.
all right. And I echo the comments that have been made before about, I think there'll be more traffic going right than you anticipate. And before we end the discussion on this, I believe, ma'am, you have one last question? We can make it quick.
Yes, it's very quick. If you're traveling on Lake Street and you get here, if there's a tractor trailer trying to make a right-hand turn, you have to back up.
Yeah, that's what we're talking about, it's a problem.
Right, and sometimes there are a dozen to 24 cars. As you turn left out of Cross, you can see the traffic is backed up.
Right.
This would be like peak early morning commuting time.
We agree with you, I mean, the point is, when Steve mentioned it, because when you're at that intersection, when you cannot see going left, you're gonna
You can't
creep
see
out.
you turn right either,
Well,
because somebody will slam into you if you turn right and there's oncoming traffic in
Well,
your lane.
so what happens with the traffic backup is when people get to that, the person that's in the number one slot is creeping out, and he's not ready to go yet. The traffic backs up. It stops.
Well, it's because it's the volume of traffic stopped.
I don't know what that-
I'm more concerned about the people, the homeowners from the project trying to turn left. And they can't,
Well,
Coming out of the site,
yes.
well, we've analyzed it. and-
Okay.
And they can turn left.
I mean,
Where-
if the traffic.
We're
is backed up.
hundreds of feet from Prospect Street. I'm probably 1,000 feet from Prospect. So I understand, in the morning, it's stop control, and in the morning, people are coming up and trying to get to the highway or other spots.
Yeah, we
So you
we
gotta
all
be
live here. We've experienced with that intersection.
Yeah.
So I think we may have some more work to do here. I think, we may have to get some more answers.
Well, I know, I recommend a continuance, because I know we have the civil peer review going. I did talk to the peer reviewer today. He believes that he can get a letter to you by the end of the week, next week. Obviously, I want to put in a little bit of buffer there, so I would say 2 weeks out. So that would go to March
13th.
Yeah, March 13th, March 14th, but what I would recommend, Lou, if this makes sense, rather than, get the peer review back and then meet, I think it would make sense to get the peer review back, respond, and then meet. So do you think maybe if we push this to, give you the month of March, do the first meeting in April?
So the 27th, March 27th.
You could do March 27th, I was gonna say April 10th, but it's up to you.
What do you guys want to do?
I would,
We listen to our town planner. What I want to do is that
You're not going away for April vacation, right?
I'm not the expert.
I would I'm not the expert either.
He's more of an expert.
Yeah, if you push it to April 10th, I know we have some coordination between town staff that we've discussed, and then, so I think if we do that and then push we'll just extend the deadline to the end of
Sure.
April.
Okay,
That-
we'll do the April 10th,
Okay,
but try to make sure that, I mean, I have a little thing with BSC, as you know. Try to, and on the civil side, they've been pretty good, on the other side, they're not so good. Try to get the report as quickly, as expeditiously as you can, so that we can review it and or make corrections prior to the next meeting.
that's why I think April 10th will give
Yeah, no,
Rob.
I agree with you.
plenty of
I
time.
think that's a fair plan.
Excuse me?
I think that's a fair plan.
Yeah, I think so.
All right, so continue to,
I need a motion. Do I have a second? Motion is to continue it to our first meeting in April, which will April 10th.
What's the decision deadline going to?
We're going to extend it beyond, either in April or beyond.
April.
That would be a separate motion, I believe.
Mr.
Thanks,
Chairman, do we have a full list of proposal that the applicant would make on traffic? As far as the signage and calming measures that we talked about today, do we have a full presentation that's in there? You wouldn't change any
In
of
the
that?
response,
I was looking at the page there, but is that final, is that?
No, I just wanna say that, there was a letter from MDM that came in today,
Yeah.
which we have not seen yet, so we don't know what else is being asked of us.
Well, I wanted to give you an opportunity to put together, trying to push this
Sure.
along without the resident that owns the property involved, that whatever your proposal is, I guess if we're kicking around traffic, I think we still need to do that. I heard school bus conversation and some other details on
Yeah.
that, but I think we're still in those traffic mode, right?
Yeah, in April 10th, that's more time, everything can get responded to, like we had a good
Okay.
conversation tonight, so.
And quite honestly, I think the intersection, the property lines need to be staked out. Because what's there on the ground now may not be on his property,
Probably that they have to be surveyed.
right? So that's what I'm saying, surveyed on the ground, so we know what we're dealing with.
That's not my decision.
we can address some of the comments
Okay.
and your comment on the intersection. I mean,
Well-
we're at April 10th, so we'll be able to, even though you focused on civil that night, we can probably give an update
Yeah,
related to the traffic that night too.
and probably staking out would be a peer review type of. There's always two ways of looking at things. There's an applicant way of doing things and we use a peer review type of
Well,
thing.
survey-
There's gotta be a equal.
They're both- they're
The
both good.
stakeout would be
There's two-
survey, I mean, it'd be surveying
Serve
property lines.
Yes.
There's no tweaking of things,
I think
everybody, they all have, they all
I
have
was a registered
licenses.
land
They
survey.
have
I think-
licenses and registrations, they're not gonna play around with their license. Come on, Phil, you know, seriously.
I'm sure Bob will opine.
All right, it's quarter of
Okay, we have a
9.
motion on the floor.
Yeah.
Any more discussion? Call for the vote.
Right,
Bill, aye.
Bill, I.
That motion passes.
Thank
Rob, do
you,
I need a
gentlemen.
motion on the
Extension,
extension of the
yeah,
deadline?
well, I might as well, so it'll be for April 30th.
Do I have a second? We have a second to extend the deadline decision to April 30th. Any discussion? Call for the vote.
Friday.
Still on?
Bill,
That motion passes unanimously. Gentlemen, thank you very much.
Thanks, Bob, appreciate it.
Thank
The
you, board.
audience,
Thank you,
for
Bob.
coming.
Appreciate your insights. Thank you.
I will be back here on April 10th. Any questions, the interim, feel free to contact the planning department. And I can't thank her enough for coming this evening. Again, as I said earlier, we have a rather robust agenda tonight. If you have any discussion outside, please keep it to a minimum, because we'll still be conducting this week. Thank you. The next item on the agenda is a continuation of the public hearing development plan for 211 South Main Street. Can you give us an update?
Sure, so we had the peer review back, took a little bit longer than anticipated, but we received that probably 2.5 weeks ago-ish, and the applicant actually just submitted revised plans yesterday, in a comment response letter. That's in your packet now. Obviously, you're just receiving it. It's really not something that the board should be taking any action on.
Okay,
But the intent here is for the applicant to show the revised plans, get everybody updated, especially the neighbors. Because there were some pretty substantial changes that were done. I think that would make the site function a lot better than what was previously proposed. With that, I'll pull the plans up too on the screen.
Yeah, that'd be great. Do you have the exhibit plans too? Because if not, I have the,
It should have everything.
okay, because I have all the sheets here if needed. I can just pull up the Paper copy.
Are you talking about the turning exhibits?
Yeah, turning exhibits, site
Alright.
distance.
Yep, I have
landscape
all of
plan.
those.
Okay,
Let me pull up the site plan first and then.
Yeah,
we'll
that'd be
go
great.
from
If
there.
and you'll just give an overview for the public and the board
yeah,
of what's changed,
yep,
and we'll get into more detail when we finish this review of the material.
understood.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, I think this is the first time the board's seeing this as
Yeah.
well as the public.
I figured instead of you reviewing it on your own, I'll give you a brief overview that way there when you're looking at it on your own time. It's a little bit easier to kind of see what's going on.
Thank you.
And just so the public's aware as well, these will all be posted on our website. We just received them yesterday, so. Everybody's getting up to speed. There you go.
All right. Well,
Floor is yours, sir.
thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Well, hello again, and good evening. I'm Joe Lozano. I'm representing my client here, Bill Alexopoulos, the owner of the property for the proposed development at 211 South Main Street, obviously in Bellingham. And again, I'm here tonight to give a brief update with regards to the changes that have been made to the overall program and the site layout since we've last met. I think first and foremost, I think a big program change that was made was the rent-a-car operation has been removed from what was originally proposed. We came in the first time with a mixed-use building that was going to be for a three-bay auto mechanic shop specializing in transmission repair and a rent-a-car facility that was going to be attached next door. That rent-a-car facility has been removed between the last plan and this plan that you're seeing right here. So a little bit less traffic that would be coming on the site, a little bit less need for parking on the site and always having stored cars on the site. So I know that that was a concern the last time, so we thought that that was a good improvement. Also, as you can see, we've shifted the building back onto the site a little bit further inboard, I guess, page east towards Manson Street, and made a wider area in front of the service bays that allows for both the regular passenger vehicles and tow trucks to be able to easily come into the site, back up and drop whatever cars are on their beds into the service bays, and then leave the site without any real interferences with cars that may be parked in the parking lot. Additionally, you know, while we made these updates to the plans, we were in receipt of the peer review letter from your guys' consulting engineer. So in making updates to the site, from just like our overall program change, we did take into consideration some of the comments that were made from them. And so those have been incorporated into the plan. A couple of other key points that were updated between the last plan and this plan that we talked about was one being pedestrian safety outside of the building. We've added a 4-foot strip outside of the door, so when you leave the building, you're not, previously you were walking basically right into the drive aisle of the parking lot area. Now there's a 4-foot strip that's going to be striped for nobody to park in, and it will be protected from the parking spaces that directly abut it with bollards. So no cars will be able to travel in that area, so you can safely walk in and out of the building. Screening, which maybe we can flip some plans later on. We've provided a much more robust landscape plan after reviewing your guys' town bylaw with regards to the plantings that are required, because we directly abut a line between the business zoning district and the residential zoning district. Plus we have 3 street frontages that we're on, and then the length of our planting area. We took all those things into consideration, and I've included in my response letter to the peer review engineer how our new landscape plan complies with the regulations that are in place. And I think that will help overall with the screening that was a concern from the last time, and looking at the site and the parked cars and the dumpster and everything of that nature. So I feel like we're definitely improving from a concern that had the last meeting with regards to that. We also did a site distance study, which I know was talked in nauseam a couple of minutes ago with the last meeting. But essentially, Our site has been designed so that none of the proposed landscaping that we're installing on the property will interfere with any of the existing site distance triangles from the intersection along Manson and Harpin and South Main Street. The grade changes that are at the corners where the site triangle go over our existing property are within a foot of the existing site, so we're not really making any giant mounds that are gonna interfere with site distances. And then we also did a site distance study from our proposed driveway. And it's more than adequate looking north along South Main Street, and it meets the minimum standard looking south along South Main Street. The a butter directly south of us has a tree that's planted like literally right at the corner of their property. And from where you do the site distance study, it somewhat impedes your view, but you still can see to the distance that you need to. In saying that, we did our site distance study per industry standard, which is 4 feet beyond the stop bar, which is located 10 feet off of the roadway. Nobody is going to pull out from South Main Street from that position. They're gonna pull a lot closer to South Main Street before they actually pull out into the roadway. And at that point in time, you can see all the way down the road, and I don't really see there being an issue with site distance in that direction.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I think those were most of the main concerns. Oh, the last thing that we did do, you guys had mentioned that there's the school, that's nearby, and maneuverability around the site, and the very poor condition of the sidewalk along South Main Street. And so that sidewalk that's there, we proposed, instead of just modifying the bare minimum to tie back into a dilapidated sidewalk along South Main Street, we've incorporated extending that sidewalk all the way to the intersection of Harpin Street, where there's an existing crosswalk that then brings you onto a sidewalk that already exists, that's in good condition, that goes down Harpin Street and around and over to the school. So we are providing the connector from basically through our site to the school for foot traffic.
Thank you for that.
Yeah, so I think between pedestrian movability across our site, screening, vehicle maneuverability in our site, and then pedestrian safety on our site, and then just the volume of cars that will need to be in the parking lot at all times due to the use change, all being concerns from the last meeting. I think we've made an improvement in all of those areas with the current layout. And at that, I'll open it up.
On behalf of the board, I want to thank you for everything you've done. You made some great improvements. I see some heads moving, I think, from some of the neighbors. We're not gonna get into any depth of questions. I did ask you, though, have you had a chance to talk to any of the neighbors?
We have not, we got the peer review letter pretty late, and then we made major program changes, as you can see. I literally ran into Rob's office. I called him on the way down here to tell him that I might show up 1 minute before the office closes, and I was hoping that he didn't leave early that day so I could drop off the plans. They were hand delivered at 4:29 yesterday afternoon. We were in a pretty big scramble to get to this point. We did listen to the neighbors at the last meeting, like I had said, and I think, you know, we took that into consideration as our best foot forward. But in the just speed of everything and trying to get into the meeting schedule.
I actually, when we had left the meeting last time, I spoke to one of the abutters briefly for about 5-10 minutes, and
Okay.
I reached out to Rob the following week as a follow-up to see if he had any contact numbers for me to reach out to. I left my number with Rob and my email. If any of the neighbors wanted to reach out to me, they could. So I did go through that with Rob.
Okay, I'm sorry, I wasn't aware.
Okay. Yeah, it's okay. In terms of the engineering company, they didn't talk to anybody,
Yeah.
but
Okay.
I did make attempts.
So what I think I'd like to do is the public, this is the first time they've seen it. They don't have time to digest this and develop some questions. Neither do we. So maybe we just set up a next meeting.
Oh, I agree. I think that's the best option, because, so this was all submitted, it was all sent to the peer reviewer this morning. So,
Okay.
I mean, they're gonna need some time to look at it, but I did talk to the peer reviewer and he feels very confident based on looking at the submission, because it was very in-depth, that he can get something to us, end of next week.
Okay,
Now, I'm gonna give him a little bit of buffer for an extra week. With that, I think, if you can just, talk to the neighbors, I think that'd be great, and then, we can move from there.
Okay.
So,
yeah,
all right.
If you,
I
if
think-
you need, go ahead.
I was gonna say, I think this is a pretty good discussion point now, because you've kind of reined things in, so. Probably more context, but anyway, sorry, continue. I don't know if the public has any questions.
I didn't want to, but I think we may have one question in the back. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. You always know me from the last time we had this discussion. I want to say you guys have made great strides at making this much pleasanter. But right off the bat, on the first, whatever you call it, the first screen you had, the snow, we already have flooding problems on Mason Street. So I know that the snow collection and, we're not always gonna have storms like this, but we have flooding issues already. And it's not just people on Harbor Street, Mason Street, you can go, anybody knows how it floods further down, people lose their swimming pools. That's one thing. My other concern is AMCO sign is, you guys have done a really good job with keeping sight lines, but where is that sign gonna go in relationship to pulling out of Harpin Street? Like because everybody put in, that's the question, where is that, how big is it gonna be? Is it gonna get shut off in the middle of the night? Is it gonna be glowing in everybody's windows?
We'll probably discuss that in greater detail at a future meeting,
Okay,
but if you want to give us a quick snapshot.
yeah, I can give, answers to those questions. The sign is located, on the south side of the driveway, along South Main Street. The sign is proposed to be a 4x6 sign. So it's not really obnoxiously tall, it's not obnoxiously large, and it's not located anywhere near Harpin Street. It's almost as far away from Harpin Street as you can get on the site. The snow storage area is located, just east of that. And we have created a sculpted basin area, to help retain the snow melting on the site better than it previously was. We've also, incorporated into our long-term, pollution prevention plan, a provision that if excess snow, arrives on the site and it can't be stored within that area and there's nowhere else to put the snow, then it needs to just be removed from the site. We've addressed those things. And then with regards to a stormwater standpoint, we have honestly, surrounded every square foot of this site that's not a parking lot, a building, or the sewage disposal system with a stormwater basin. I don't know what else can be done from a stormwater standpoint. We've captured almost every single square foot of pavement that's on the property and routed it through our stormwater management facilities. And we're showing that there's negligible impact. From the site. We have less than 0.2 CFS leaving the site on a 100-year storm event, which is less than you would normally see from any residential half-acre site anywhere in town that definitely doesn't have any stormwater management on it. It's just got a roof and a driveway, and all that water goes onto the roadway. Our site in general, it is better than that from a runoff standpoint through our hydrologic model. So I think we're pretty well addressing any stormwater concerns.
Yeah,
are you gonna be gating your entrance when you guys are not open, like when the place is not open, so that way we don't have to hear a truck being dropped from a tow truck at 3 o'clock in the morning? You know what I'm saying? Like, everybody's cars break down all different times, day and night. They're gonna get towed someplace, and if they get towed at 3 o'clock in the morning, 1 o'clock in the morning, are we gonna have to have the trucks dropping them off at that time? Like, is there any way you can gate it while you guys aren't open?
I'll speak to, it briefly, is that, like, we have, the company has business hours that are normal business hours, so, I don't, this isn't necessarily somewhere that has its own, like, on-staff tow truck drivers, I don't believe.
No.
So, like, usually the overnight towings are from tow yards that, that's what they do, they tow trucks. We're in the business of fixing the vehicles. And you would have had to have an appointment to bring your car to this place. So we don't necessarily anticipate the need to have a gate because, the business operation is not one that, you know, has that ability to have the on-staff tow trucks that are bringing cars to the facility at all hours of the night.
They specialize in transmissions too, so if you get in a car wreck, it's not getting dropped off, if your tire falls off, it's not going there, I mean, it's specifically a transmission shop.
Okay.
So that's, usually a car breaks down, I mean, you wanna call them up, I mean, it's not a one-day fix, it's a process, so I think they would probably call up, the owners, set up an appointment, a time to drop it off and go from there.
Before you move forward, I sense one last question.
No, I just have a comment. I just feel bad that we're getting so many businesses in the area. We have the baseball fields, we have the school, we have the walking, we have all this for children, for kids, for families. And we're gonna stick another business in the area, and I just feel bad about that.
Okay.
We have the Sonnet too, that is nicely done, and the 5 baseball fields, and sometimes they even play soccer up where Pinecrest used to be. They'll have a
So
pickup game.
it's a family area, which I
live around the corner. Want to entertain, can you look at the schedule? So
Yeah,
we're not getting
so
crazy with any future meetings.
yeah, I would recommend, right now, it's the only item on the agenda, although I think that's gonna change after tonight, but anticipating a week for the peer review, give it 2 weeks just in case. I don't know if you'll have to respond to that letter. I mean, you have a very in-depth response, excellent job with this resubmission. With that, I think it would make sense to continue to the second meeting in March, so then that way the peer review's back, and if there is anything at all that would need to be responded to, I think you'd have plenty of time.
Okay.
And then with that, the deadline's right now the end of March, so I would just recommend just extending it to the end of April. I think
For a decision.
for a decision, I think we're getting to the.
Is that just in case if we need to?
Yep.
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
Exactly.
Then,
Yep.
yeah, I don't necessarily think that's a issue, that's a problem.
Like, tell me, yeah.
Entertain a motion, can you get this to the 22nd?
I just need a second.
Do I have a second?
Second, Phil.
Any discussion, a call for the vote?
Brian, I.
Bill, aye?
Bill, I.
That motion passes unanimously. We also need a motion to continue the decision deadline
Extend.
until the end of April. Need a motion for that? Do I have a second?
Second, Phil.
Motion made and seconded to continue the decision deadline to the end of April. At the call for the vote. Brian, aye? Bill, aye?
Bill, I.
Steve, aye.
That motion passes unanimously. Gentlemen, thank you very much.
Yeah,
I appreciate your
thank
efforts.
Thank
And
you.
to the public, thank you very much. And we will see you in 2 weeks. I would assume so.
More than 2 weeks.
That's right, excuse me. Come on. Thank you. Rob, can you bring us up to speed on 57 Mendon Street?
Yes, so 57 Mendon Street, we had the peer review, which had sat for quite some time. And the applicant ended up resubmitting information about a week and a half ago, maybe?
Yeah.
Yeah, so about a week and a half ago. With that, I talked to the peer reviewer, that's been submitted to the peer reviewer again for review. Another pretty in-depth response was submitted by land planning, so I'm not anticipating a whole mess of issues. I think really the concerns that the peer reviewer had really have to do with modeling. There was some other comments regarding some record keeping items with our new planning board regulations. I don't know if you remember, we adopted those new ones in June. The one thing that was noted was that those actually were enacted after this application went in. So there's a couple items in there, and I thought you guys did a good job of figuring out which ones didn't apply. It was really just there's like an annual reporting situation that is new, which, to be honest with you, the town is still trying to figure out how exactly we're going to accomplish it. It's part of our MS4 permit, but with that, the long-term O&M plan that they have still recognizes that there needs to be ongoing record keeping. It's just the submission method, but I'm getting into the weeds. But anyway, that was one of the other items that was noted in the peer review. Now, there were some revisions, and I figured it would be good for the applicant to just come in and get everybody up to speed on anything that's changed.
Yep.
The peer reviewer mentioned that he should have a letter back end of next week, so which is good. I'm still giving that extra week buffer for all of these things just in case for planning purposes. But that's what I have currently. I think too, one thing to know, I'll pull the plans up because I have them, but I think two items that I would like, Bill, if you could address, and Jay, is there was questions from abutters because there was two specific areas that were of concern for runoff. And looking at the plans, I believe long-term you've addressed these, and Jay, I know you mentioned too in a previous hearing that you've done some temporary things, which if you want to reiterate that at a little bit later, but if you could just address, I would say focus on those right now, and then, any other questions or comments the board and public has would be good. I'm gonna pull up the plans on the screen so everybody can see. Bear with me for 1 second.
Mm-hmm.
What is that noise?
I don't know what that noise is. It sounds like a,
A little bit of hum.
yeah. I think it's that vibrating. You just gotta put more weight on it. Go stand over there.
Sounds like it's over there.
I'm hearing this.
Okay, I don't know.
That phone ring?
We've heard it for 2 hours, so
Yeah.
it's not going anywhere.
Like living next to the highway, after a while, you don't hear it.
What's yours?
Okay, yeah, I think the area that Rob was alluding to was right.
Can you speak up a little bit so people behind you?
Yeah, the area that Rob was talking about for runoff that Jay did a fix on was right through here by where his dumpster is and his lower entrance. He has added an earthen berm, as we're proposing, which will be extended later after it's all approved, and also improved the berm. So that should cut off any runoff currently going to the neighbors to the north. I think that was the main concern for neighbors out here.
Correct, and I think the other one was from the Willie residence, which is over here. And with that, with the stormwater design in the peer review was to make sure that the outlet control structures and such are all designed per this, the standards to make sure that keep runoff or any runoff leaving the site it meets pre-development standards and such, so.
And our runoff is significantly decreased. 2-year storm, we're going from 0.49 CFS to 0.09. 10-year storm, 4.54 to 2.36. And the 100-year storm, 12.8 to 8.68 CFS. So it reduces that runoff to the Willie side quite a bit.
Okay, for the layman and the neighbors, can you just let them know what the impact is and the decrease in numbers?
Runoff is by flow, CFS is cubic feet per second. So on the 100-year storm, which is, the largest storm, which would be 8 inches of rain in a 24-hour period, hopefully we never see it. But it reduces it by about a third of what runs off now. So it's much less.
Thank you.
Rob, was there a question on pre-development, what those numbers actually were and what was involved?
Yeah, that was,
Has that been settled?
well, so they responded to that in the peer review, so the peer reviewer is gonna review it again, but
Okay.
I took a look at the responses, I think that they're on the right track, so. But once we get,
Forward on that.
yeah, once we get the clean peer review letter, I'll leave it in the hands of Dave.
Thank you.
So,
Any other concerns that you've done?
Most of the stuff was technical stuff relative to drainage, doesn't really change the plan and how it looks.
Okay. Rob, everything you want to add before I go to the public?
no, I think that's pretty much where we're at. I know there was actually a question from one of the neighbors about the zoning situation that was brought up. And I think, was that addressed at the last meeting at all? Cause I don't know if there was, but I think the question was just regarding uses and such, and I know looking back, there's a lot of history with the site way before my time. But I did talk to our zoning enforcement officer, and I know like this site did end up utilizing, it's essentially the Dover Amendment for educational purposes, because there's training on site. And that's regarding to the Cranes 101. So I think that
So isn't there supposed to only be X number of businesses? And at the last meeting I was at, if I remember, he was proposing to do something completely different, which would add another business.
so you're talking about the license at the select board, correct?
Select board, not this
So,
meeting, but where we.
Sure, so, and, I don't want to get too much in, because it's separate than what we're looking at. We're kind of looking at the stormwater side of things with this, the
But it only
improvements.
relates because of the fact, in this meeting, we've brought up unregistered vehicles. We've brought up the fact that there is a ton of vehicles back there that I don't think any of us know what there are. And I don't really know how well anyone's monitoring the number of businesses, but I certainly, there could be 5 going on there, and I don't necessarily know how that's managed. So the concern is, between the 2 meetings, how can we understand that we're not bringing more businesses in than are allowed? Because there is a lot of new activity that I'm seeing with new vehicles and.
Sure, and I think, so that would be a question for our zoning enforcement officer, Tim Icardi, which, I have mentioned, because I know there was a complaint about, different things with the site, and I brought Tim in on them. Not to get into specifics, but with that, the way that it would work is depending on what uses, there's no definitive limit of uses you can have on a site. It all depends on how it works with the zoning, if you have the approvals for it or if it's by right. So that's where, like if you have a strip mall, for example, there's numerous businesses, but they're all allowed by the zone. With that, I would have to talk to Tim to figure out exactly what the uses are that are allowed for the site through the previous historic permitting. But with that, Jay, I know you are trying to get a license through the select board, which I think they alluded to, that they want to make sure that everything is correct based on the historic permitting before that happens. For our scope, we're more looking at, is this going to work, and we're not going to flood out neighbors, and you're not going to cause TSS issues and such.
Then I would go back to, I mean, Charles isn't here, but do we know if any of the previous flooding issues and the berm and all of the previous issues have been addressed? So I still feel like from our perspective, if the other issues aren't addressed and you're ready to approve something that's bringing new irrigation or different, how it's just compiling the problem, it's not solving the first problem. I again, please take over it.
At the last meeting or the meeting prior, it was, the board determined that the runoff coming into my yard needed to be corrected immediately. And, Mr. Strom here said he was gonna have his guy, best guy, the next day, take care of it this week. Nothing has happened,
Nothing at all?
nothing at all.
This, the plan shows like sheds and garages, it's not showing any of the structures on our land. The white residence, the first one, we have an in-the-ground pool and a pool house back there with 50 feet, maybe, to the property line. It's completely flooded right now between the snow and the rain we've had. And granted, the ground is frozen, but you guys skate back there. The runoff has been, through the whole season, and of course it's freezing, so it's just building up.
And that low point, I'm sure there's some runoff, because I know how your yard pitches to the back, but there is evidence still of runoff coming from.
Yeah.
Okay,
Originally, when we bought our property 27, maybe 28 years ago, Mr. Sturm's property was horse pasture, and it was all level. And as the previous owners, when they built the first building, it's been built up slowly.
Mhm.
So the grade is now,
Probably from where it originally was, it's gotta be 4 feet, 4.5 feet taller. Along the
So
back
this-
area.
it's been an evolution of the way the drainage
is
is.
back there. The whole grade has all come up. But obviously my yard didn't come up with it.
Yeah. Yeah,
And so it is the low point.
yeah,
And on the original plans way back, the Cape Cod berm that was on the plans, it was supposed to go all the way around the property, cover all the paved area, was removed on my side so that he could get his work testing area right over here. And then he did build a berm right in this area. He put an earthen berm right here that was going to be, it was gonna beautify it
We were promised,
so that we wouldn't see all this stuff over there.
but because our property is now lower, we have from like our main floor of our home, we're not even talking like upper levels, our main floor looks right out. We've got a bird's eye view of the whole property. And it is what it is. But we have to look at it constantly,
yeah.
8 months out of the year when there's no leaves on the trees, that's what we're looking at.
Nothing was corrected.
No.
When it was said that it was going to be corrected.
By the way,
In a
Mr.
timely
President,
fashion.
I'm going back and forth.
you're fine.
Okay, just making sure. No, it's all good, but with that, so I know, Jay, you mentioned that you've put some type of berm in, and the plan is to make it,
Extend it down around the corner is what it looks like,
yeah.
Over by the storage
which
area,
will hopefully,
fix some of the hot top berm, sure.
Now, I think,
And most
First
of that
of
gets
all-
fixed as part of the approval, too.
well, that's what I want to get at, because the earthen berm's one thing, and I think it's gonna help to first give some type of screening for the whites, but the big thing is, Mike, what you were mentioning is that berm, which you have on your plans to reestablish the curbing, needs to happen. With that, I don't know what the board wants to do, but, I think that needs to happen like yesterday, and I don't know if Jay, you're willing to do that.
In fact, let me just jump in. It's not an earthen berm.
Some of it is.
Well, that was original. And the level of the yard hasn't changed because it's still the same level as the pavement. So that level is exactly the way it was before. What I did do is I made a berm between 3 and 4 feet tall in order to prevent the runoff from leaving the property. But there was one area where, for whatever reason, we missed. There was no berm. So what I did is because you can't get any hot asphalt right now, is I went out and got cold patch and made the berm out of the cold patch. So it's more substantial than just an earthen berm.
Okay.
Right, but again, it's temporary. In the plans, once we do go forward, then we're gonna do a nice engineered, hard berm along that area. That will, hopefully be sufficient.
Yeah, as part of the drainage plan to contain all the runoff from the pavement, we need the berm to do that.
And I agree with you, because I think that the critical thing is just conveying water to your structures, which are next to the Willie residence. And to go back to that, when I went out to the site, when was it, last June, I think?
Yeah.
I noted the basin in the back, that's what discharges onto Chuck's property, and, it's not engineered currently. I don't even, there's really no outlet control structure. If there is, it's not engineered, so I don't even know if that's retaining any water. It might just be collecting it and sending it straight to that yard, which is why one of the comments with the pre-development was to make sure that it wasn't modeling the unengineered basin.
Yeah, because that wasn't there as our base. plan.
Correct, and that was where you were alluding to, Phil. And I believe that has been addressed, but I'll let the peer reviewer deal with that. With that, with the engineering side of this, to get the basin to actually function as a basin where it holds water, infiltrates it, and isn't just sending stuff next door, that's the intent of this. So with that, the curbing and conveyance is really the critical part to make sure that this all works. And I know the board was hoping for some type of resolution. I'm glad that there was something with the berm. I would hope that in the meantime, I think we're getting pretty close on this stormwater side of things. Once a clean peer review comes back, obviously it's the board's decision to approve or deny something. I'm not saying anything is set in stone, but it sounds like soon there will probably be an avenue that the applicant can move forward with the permanent fix. The temporary fix in the meantime, I would like to see if there is some type of blowout with that earthen berm that you did and there's cold patch. And we really want to get that squared away like ASAP. We wanted that, at the last meeting, but I guess I'll stop talking right now, but permanently, all I'm saying is with these improvements, I believe that these things are getting addressed.
Okay,
They just need to be constructed and approved, of course.
before I turn it over to the other board members. I echo your comments that this needs to be addressed, that we need to address the concerns of the neighbors. But I'd like to hear from other board members.
I'm concerned for the length of time that that we've discussed. I think the application was submitted in 2023. There's been a number of, I'll take care of it to no avail. And without judging based on other applications that the applicant has brought before us in other contexts, it's in keeping with the tell you what you want to hear and hope to get to do as little as possible. So I would really like to see some definitive action taken quickly, and that whatever decision that the board renders, there's a strict timeline built into that decision about when these things are done, that there's strict monitoring to make sure that the applicant is actually doing what they say, which has not always been has not always borne out. So this is ridiculous that people have waited so long and promises have been made to us and to the neighbors, and things are still not done, and it's just not right.
I agree, this is ridiculous. We've asked several times, we've addressed it several times, we've talked about it several times. I've asked several times, what can we do to put something in temporary to solve the problem? There's still a problem. Rob, I'm not sure what we can do from a town hall meeting.
I have an idea, Phil.
I think we need to take action before anything gets approved, but, turn it to
I have an idea,
the,
Steve.
okay.
The only thing I'll say is that if there was some promises made that weren't kept, then they should be rectified before we go any further, you know, with the permanent plans.
Okay,
I mean,
Here-
I
here's-
think that-
go ahead.
I just think that's a reasonable, you know, if it's interim solution, then that should be met before you go to the permanent solution.
I don't think that's unreasonable. I think we all echo the same thing. We've all heard from the applicant. We've all heard from the residents. I'm going to throw a suggestion out there. Is it feasible we could draft a letter to the applicant outlining what we want to have done, certain due dates by, we don't need them to come in, but this could be done within the next 2 weeks, weather permitting. Send a copy of that to the zoning enforcement officer. And if you could report back to us in 2 weeks.
Yeah, I think.
Well, so here's the tension. We want the permanent resolution to be approved as quickly as possible. And we shouldn't condition our approval of the permanent resolution on steps being taken because we want this to be done quickly and properly. So I think the solution is get it done by the next meeting. And then have a deadline where these improvements are made and monitored and made sure they're done correctly within a very short window of time.
When you say get it done, you mean, you know, the design is vetted out, it's ready to be approved is what you're getting
As
at.
quickly as possible, no more continuances. Get it
Yep.
done.
No, and I agree with you because the permanent fixes, like I said, creating that basin in the back to be engineered properly, that's a critical one. And then also making sure that the paved areas are conveyed to the engineered basin is the second critical thing, which it's right now not set up like that. So I agree with you, Brian, and I guess the question is making sure that, you know, Jay, you get this thing constructed ASAP to work, you know, because you do have neighbors that are very concerned about the flooding. Just, you know, justly so. With that, I know I can absolutely get, I've already talked to the peer reviewer. I believe that based on these changes, it meets the standards. But we'll get that in definitive writing from the peer reviewer. I can also, if the board is okay with this, to get this moving, draft the approval, because this is for the development plan approval and for the stormwater permit. I can get that going for the next meeting, so we can act on it quickly. I can also talk to Tim, the zoning enforcement officer, to see what grounds we have in working with Jay to get this thing, just like you said, built ASAP. That's the area that I am not completely sure of how we can do that. It's really just making sure that Jay, you're working with us. But from our end, I can work to get this resolved.
Yeah, I think that's reasonable. We get it in and done, no more continuances. Get everything teed up so it's decided and it's a strong decision with conditions and teeth. And if we can put deadlines in it, then let's put it and make it happen.
So is there like a bond that needs to be put in place or something along those
Well, that
lines?
would take too long.
We can condition a bond.
Now for like a private
Well,
property.
since this was before my time, my only question is, while that's being done, is there something that has to be done in the interim for this gentleman in the back that was supposed to be done?
I think it has to be done pronto by the 27th. Here's my feeling. If it's not done on the 27th, the decisions are put on hold.
That doesn't help anything.
Well, what else can we do to get it done quicker?
We make a decision and so it's done.
because the permanent solution is the answer.
I
And
understand that.
by delaying the construction of the permanent solution, by conditioning steps to be taken in advance of it, just slows everything down and is detrimental to the neighbor.
I don't think it does, Brian. I think we're simply telling them, if you don't do this within 2 weeks, what then we'll do for?
Okay, but that only harms the neighbors, because if this is never built, what does he care?
That's a good
What,
point.
yeah,
To me-
what you
to me-
want is to make sure that that there's some type of way to make sure the water is not conveyed into the White's property immediately. Can we go do this? Jay?
Yes.
Bill? I'm around on Monday of next week. Can we meet at the site and come up, take a look, see what the heck is the issue with the blowout or whatever? And we will get a definitive solution there, and I can just follow up with you later in the week to make sure that that's the case. That's the temporary fix,
That's correct.
and we can continue on with the permanent fix as I laid out previously.
Fine.
From a development point
I'll
of view.
go a step further. Why don't you come down in the morning and see what we've already done?
But it's not working for the neighbors, sir,
How do you know?
because they're telling us.
Come take a look. Well, come take a look.
All right, well, let's aim for Monday, all right? And then we'll go from there, okay?
Okay.
Doing Monday. So what I would recommend is we have the peer reviewer on. I chatted with him. I'm gonna talk to him again to make sure that this gets squared away. I would recommend continuing this to March 27th, which is the second meeting in March,
Okay,
because then that way we'll have the peer review back. You're giving me a look, Brian.
Too far. It's too late.
can you give us an update?
Well,
on
it's
that?
just making sure that I mean, if you, well, fine, we'll continue to March, the first meeting in March. Want to do that? I will just I gotta make sure that the peer review is back.
How about the usage questions for the development plan? Do we need follow up on that?
There's no proposed change in use through this board. There is no change in use.
And do we
proposed.
have that defined use now?
Meaning,
How many types of businesses are there?
What business, I mean, the question that was addressed from the audience. Maybe it's a zoning enforcement officer that's involved, but
yeah, it would.
I don't want to slow it down, but if we're going for a development plan, we gotta.
Yeah, I think you're going into Mission Creek. Like, that's not before us. That's before the select board, and that's also before Tim. So as much as I would like to also resolve that issue for the neighbors, it's not before us.
Okay, so were we doing a stormwater plan or a development plan? Or we're doing both, right?
You're doing both, but the development plan, it's not regarding the use, it's regarding the disturbance associated with these improvements. So,
Can you just remind us again, I know, I apologize, but I'm gonna say this. When you say development, has anything changed? We've had about 4 meetings over the course of the year where we've talked about land and trees, and again, there's a fence that's missing that hasn't been put back up. There's, like, what development, are you talking about the parking? I guess I'm still not clear. Has development changed? Because we've been in 4 or 5 meetings, and every time we bring up an issue, again, nothing's resolved, but have you changed development, or I'm still not, I'm sorry, again, I apologize. I'm not clear when you say development, where have we
so
ended up?
there's the permitting process, which is, in this case, in Bellingham, if you go over a certain square footage of disturbance, you trip something called the development plan approval. Now, what Phil was talking about with uses, most times when the development plan approval comes in, it's because there's a new business that might be building something. So the use is typically incorporated into the development plan approval, stating that this is the use that we're approving. Also, if there's a use that goes in here that isn't allowed per our zoning, then it would require, other relief. That's where the use comes into play. For this, as far as any changes go, this plan it was revised in June, I believe, of last year. There was the first submission, and then there was basically the request to withdraw, which the board recommended the applicant doesn't do that because we wanted to see some type of fix for the stormwater issues. With that, they came back with this design in June. That design, the fundamentals of it has not changed. The change has been the tweaks with some of the stormwater elements, so making sure that the modeling's correct, that the inverts and.
So you're 100% sure when you say development, and if that got approved, there is no additional plans for building, tearing up land, moving trees, doing anything of disturbance that we have not yet heard?
Correct.
That is more how I should have asked it.
So the limit of disturbance would be limited to the plan that's in front of us, correct? So you bring up a great point. If for some reason a building crops up, or they would have to go for a building permit, that's not approved through this board, so it would require this whole process again for another development plan approval. So that, what we are looking at are the stormwater management improvements, as well as those geogrid areas that right now are gravel. So that's what we are looking at as part of this.
So if there was a crane there and someone's cutting down a tree, or all of a sudden the parking lot expands, that is something that's not being approved, and there's no worry on our end that we would have to worry that someday we come home and all of that's happening.
Well, I mean, it could happen, but it would be a violation. Is that what, are you saying that like this approval is, it's not gonna be?
No,
an
I'm saying, I
umbrella?
don't think I'm clear when we say development, and again, I don't want to hold up the meeting, I apologize, and they have a lot of concerns they want to get to discuss, but I guess when we're saying the stormwater piece is one and the development piece is another, I'm still confused, if anything, on development that would affect the neighbors, not his business. I mean, he has a right to do what he needs to do with his business to a point, but
Sure.
I'm wondering if the development changed, that there's anything we should know about.
And to that point, so there's two permits, a stormwater permit, development plan approval. They're both intertwined with the stormwater aspect. The development plan approval gets tripped because of the limited disturbance. And it's associated with the storm. I know it's very confusing, because when I say development plan.
Well,
approval-
limited disturbance to you might not be limited disturbance to us. Again, it's just the unexpected and not knowing what's coming, because I feel like, again, this has gone on for so long. Maybe you guys have more, but I don't want to hold it up. But are you getting where I'm coming from? I'm still,
We understand what you're saying.
and I apologize for,
No, you don't apologize. The scope's very narrow here.
It is, and I understand, and there's so much history with this site as I'm learning, which I've only been in this seat for 10 months, so
Yeah.
please bear with me. But, I get it, and that's why what we can do is just make sure that if this gets approved, that the conditions are in line, and making sure that we're documenting that this is what we're approving.
And
So,
those conditions we discussed in public.
yeah, so like the approval would be discussed in another meeting such as this.
Andrea, you.
No, I just wanted to make the statement that I would like to see the stormwater situation approved so it can go forward. I would rather have a permanent fix than a Band-Aid.
Mhm.
I don't want a temporary anything. I mean, it would be nice, but I'd rather see the energy concentrated on getting the permanent solution. The drainage
We
issue.
dealt with it this long, so.
Yeah, I mean, it's a couple of months of rainwater isn't gonna. Hopefully won't do any more damage than when it's done, but, I'd rather see the whole project be able to proceed than just have a Band-Aid and have the project prolonged.
Gotcha. And I'm in agreement that permanent fix is the best fix here. All right, so with that, I know what I have to do. Brian, you are saying the next meeting, which is March. That's 6th, March 13th.
When are we having that meeting already?
Oh, we have one one item.
Okay,
So
it's a big,
we're going to have, I think, a second item, which will be the last thing we discuss tonight, but, I feel like we could get those three items done in one night, and I understand the concern, we want to get it moving, so if you would like, if we continue to March 13th, we're gonna be fine with our decision deadline, so why don't we go with that, and I will get I can get a decision rendered, a draft one for everybody.
okay, I have one question. There was a sign posted on Hartford Avenue about a meeting on, March 13th. That has seemed to make the rounds.
Can we talk about that after
Sure.
everything? Yeah, why don't we?
I'm just
Yeah.
talking about the schedule.
Yeah, well, I can bring you guys up to speed in this public meeting, but why don't we get through the business? I know
Okay.
there's still one more item on the agenda.
What is the decision deadline on this?
March 31st, so we still have, if we had to go to March 27th for some reason, we still have time, but I'll be rendering the decision anyway, so. So we're in good shape.
Okay, then I'll second it.
You don't look satisfied, Phil.
I don't like decision deadlines that close,
I get that.
but in this case, I think it's the case. So I just seconded the motion that was made.
Okay, in my mind, I made a motion to continue the hearing.
No, I just did.
Yeah,
No, you did. You said you wanted.
yeah, that was the motion, my ears.
The motion.
We have a motion on the floor to continue this to, March 13th. Pending information being sent from the planning office. I'll call for, any more discussion? Call for the vote.
Brian, I.
Bill, aye.
Bill,
Steve, I.
That motion passes unanimously. Gentlemen, if you could deal with the neighbors. And we'll see you back on the 13th of March.
All right, I just.
I'm not around Monday morning, but I'm around the afternoon.
All right, we'll talk.
James,
So always around. So if you can just sign that. So it's gonna be March 13th is a continuance. This deadline isn't getting.
The
extended.
people in the back. We'll see you in 2 weeks, little.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
The other guy that has the other building, anyway.
Yeah. Yeah.
He was gonna. Anyways, there's storage. Yes, downstairs, but they're open. Oh, but when you're in the just find out what it is, as long as it's not failed, not, but there's things when.
Certainly,
That would be
yeah,
great.
and
I-
also,
Thank you. We put a lot of time.
that's my card.
Thank you very much, ma'am.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
We'll see you
All right,
again.
thanks, guys.
You bet.
I'll reach out to you.
Monday morning's good for me, not the bill.
Okay,
Yeah, I got at 8 o'clock. Hopefully that by 10. I'm not in the office tomorrow,
okay,
but that's kind of my schedule. If you even need me there, just real big.
okay. No, that works.
Yeah, 'cause Monday afternoon, is a little tenuous for me.
Sure.
That's all.
Okay, that works. I'll reach out.
Do you want to keep that picture of my burden?
Thank you.
I don't know where it went.
Thank you so
Yeah,
much.
I'll hold on to it. Thanks, guys. Thanks.
Hi, Graham.
All right.
Hi. My turn.
You're next.
I'm next. Think I'm
Been
the only
waiting
one
a
left
long
in here.
time.
Yeah,
I hope-
sorry for the-
I hope it goes well.
Yeah, sorry for the late night, Kim.
All right, you guys have a late and go stuff.
Thank you.
You're welcome, sir. Thank you very much. Thank you for your patience.
All right, glad I brought a little project to do.
Good.
I'm happy that.
The
I will
billable
say
hours.
that.
Rob, bring us up to speed on Allen.
Yeah, so at the last meeting, we kind of went over the overview of what was proposed. There was just a couple items that were kind of, I don't want to say they were remaining, but we wanted to get legal counsel's input. So basically, just as an overview of the scenic road process in Bellingham. There's basically two, well, I guess three items that are the major components, and that is making sure that vegetation along a scenic road remains, making sure that the rock walls or stone walls, if there's any that are applicable, remain, and then the other thing is the sound. So with that, there's no stone walls that exist on that site. And there's really no vegetation except I think one tree. So the mitigation measures for that, the stone wall and the trees have all been addressed through the plans, the landscape plans that are proposed through LMP. The big item was sound, and basically, and Kim, you can, maybe if you want to go over it, but essentially, the applicant's attorney did submit a legal memo to our town council for review on just highlighting how they felt that they didn't really, the sound bylaw doesn't really apply in this case due to, it's really because the use is not changing. So, and our attorney, Amy Questle, town council, agreed with the interpretation. So with that, we are still, the applicant is still proposing a sound barrier. I did ask in the last meeting if we could get basically the applicable details that they were approved through the development plan approval, which, you know, we can always reference the development plan approval and a decision for the scenic road, but it's better to just have the material as part of the application so it can be put in the decision. So I requested that, you submitted it, so we have all that information. With that, you know, with the buy-in from our town council, you know, I would recommend we move to close this out. I would recommend, you know, we could continue this to the March 13th meeting, and I can draft the approval with conditions. That's what I would recommend doing, because this has been a long road for this project. And I think we would all like to see the improvements made. And I will leave it at that. I don't know if you have any questions for me, applicant. Uh-oh.
No, so I was looking at the design and there's that 8-foot wall, and then there's the gate for the entrance, the people to access the property. That's a chain link fence, I think.
Correct. And
So is there a way, to me, there's a gigantic opening and a wall designed to mitigate sound and also to hide, to obscure the appearance of the mulch piles in the operation. Is there a way to get that the gate portion to be what's the word? Ron?
Opaque.
Opaque.
Just to introduce myself, Kim Crowe at Baker Braverman Barbadoro. I don't think so, just to have the room to move it in and out, and it's a fire purpose, so that it's not blocked. I mean, we can look at it. I know it was designed that way, and I quite frankly can't remember exactly why it was, but I'm trying to see how big that opening is.
I think it was.
That's probably 50 or 60 feet for the opening, where there is the black, like the black chain link gate portion of it. I mean, I can certainly ask our engineers. My guess is it probably can't for a safety reason more than anything.
So in other projects, it's actually a pretty easy fix. They put slats through the chain link.
Oh,
Or,
yeah.
or some sort of covering. So I'm not looking for a wooded fence or anything, just something to block it out.
Okay, I see what you, yeah,
I said, that's all we're looking for.
yeah. I don't see
Something
that.
solid with holes in it, so the wind blows through, and we have asked for that before.
Okay. Yeah, I don't see any problem with that as long as there's no sightline things that I can't imagine because it opens when the truck's going in it, so that it would be fine.
So, just the other thing, like, there was a business on the other side of the town, we said, can you do something about the fence and make sure it's opaque? And, they did, they put it's opaque, you can still see through it. So whatever material that you can use, just if you can make sure it's not actually see-through, it's just. That would be.
You said
It's not
that's chain link?
On the decision, on the proposal there.
Just the gate for the entrance, but the rest, you can see the detail where it's gonna be a stone wall with.
Yeah,
a
but to
wooden
your
stuff.
point, they make those, plastic slats that go in between
Yeah.
the chain link.
I don't think it's a big deal.
No,
Yeah, you,
Vinyl with holes.
what you're
Left and
referring
right.
to, I know exactly what business you're talking about, but they put up a fabric, which they have good opaque fabric. I think what they used was a landscape fabric that you would put like underneath mulch. So it's not really made for that. So, yeah, I mean, that's a simple condition, whether it be slats or just an opaque gate.
Could do that. The other just thing I want to mention, because you mentioned 8-foot fence, so that was part of our development plan application was for a waiver for zoning. And that wasn't granted as part of the development plan, so we want to do a 6-foot fence in case we would need a variance for an 8-foot fence. So that's the only clarification on that.
Okay.
And that's shown on the details.
They're 55 feet, mulch miles, so it's a 6 feet, 8 feet, opaque slats. What's the tip?
Good luck. Any other questions?
No, thank you.
And
That was addressed.
I would just ask, just with respect to logistics, if I can get a copy of the draft decision, if I don't have any feedback on it, if I could excuse my attendance at the next meeting. And if there's any questions, I'm happy to come down, but that might speed things along for everybody.
What's the time frame of, we could get you a positive decision that you'd be implementing this?
Yeah, I mean, we're looking to do it fairly soon. We, our order of conditions is up at the end of the summer, I believe, and our development plan expiration is in the fall, so we would have to get moving on it pretty soon.
So, but what do you propose?
Next meeting, I would recommend, and we're good with our, the decision deadline sets at the end of March, so I would recommend, we just continue this to March 13th. I will draft the decision. I can get you it early. We always do that anyway, if anybody requests it, and, we'll go from there. That works with everybody.
And you'll participate in person or via Zoom?
If I could do Zoom, that would be great, yeah.
We can.
I don't think she even wants to do Zoom, so.
Sorry?
She's asking to waive her.
If Zoom is an option, I'm happy to do Zoom. It's an hour
I
for
don't
me,
think she has to
so I don't mind
I
doing
just want to
that.
wait.
Yeah, if it's just an administratively approving a
Okay.
decision she's already looked at, nobody needs to show up for any reason.
Probably increase the bill a lot.
That's nice, Bill.
Appreciate it.
I learned that from you, my friend.
Yeah.
Perfect. Thanks, Gavin.
Want to make a motion?
To continue,
Yes.
to
March 13th.
March 13th,
Congratulations.
and
Have a second?
Second, for
Any other discussion? Call for the vote.
Right.
Bill, aye?
the
That motion passes unanimously.
Thank you.
Have a good night, everyone.
Betsy, I
Thanks, Gavin.
apologize. You're late for the meeting.
All good.
I'm glad you get some work done.
No, we're close to my latest, so that's good. All right. Take care.
Take
Have a
it
good
easy.
night.
We'll be in touch.
Ron, can you tell about the Harley bond reduction?
Oh, yeah, that one, we're just to ignore that one again.
Okay,
That one is in DPW's hands.
okay. Let's
So-
talk about the Blackstone North Street extension.
Blackstone North Street Extension,
I have a document.
the applicant has requested a 24-month extension. The weird thing is, so there actually was a Permit Extension Act for COVID. And this very well may have been included in it, which would go to 2026. the issue is that there's some gray areas with it, so I just told the applicant, just request the extension, because the reason why the extension was requested was due to a health reason, that's why he was unable to start the project, pretty substantial one. So, you know, I think with this project, this is the North and Blackstone Street one that was whittled down from, what was it, 30 buildings to, I think, 5, and, you know, it's.
A lot of triplexes.
Yeah, a lot of triplexes were whittled down, so I mean, beneficial project, and I would recommend, you know, extending or requesting the extension, because I know the other thing too, the applicant had to go through a pretty lengthy process with natural heritage, he had to do a turtle safety plan. Yes, that's a thing, so. And that actually, I think, was just closed out recently, so I would recommend extending the.
This is the current owner, is that one point?
Yep, yeah, it's Ravenholm, John Mashushian.
Entertain a motion.
So move, but just with discussion when you get there.
Okay. Do I have a second? Discussion.
I have discussion.
I figured.
Yeah. So, under these circumstances, I think 2 years is fine, because, you know, health reasons and the turtle study and all that stuff. But just for posterity, we typically only do 1 year, because we want people to come back and we don't lose sight of it and all of that stuff. But under the circumstances, I think 2 years is appropriate.
And I will also add that during the time between when we issued our approval and now, was not just sitting there, there was so much work on conservation side. I mean, I think they went over about a year after we granted our approval until they granted theirs, and then there's another year after that for the natural heritage stuff to get worked out, so.
That's 2 years ago? All of that was 2 years ago?
It might have been a year ago.
Okay.
No,
No, it's closer to.
it was probably a year and a
Beyond
half. I've been here almost a year, and it was well before my time.
You're on the board.
I was, and I was sitting in on the Concom meeting when it was getting closed out with conservation, which is significantly after our, so, yeah,
I'm glad.
it does, so. Anyway, that's where we're at with that.
Okay, any other discussion?
Nope.
Call for the vote.
Brian, I.
Bill, aye. That motion passes unanimously.
Excellent.
We had a chance to look at the meeting minutes from our last meeting.
Yeah, the only thing I saw was Stephen, I think you seconded a couple of them.
He did.
There was a couple involved. It had my name on it instead of his. There should have been his name. Is that your recollection?
Yeah, but which ones? I have no clue now.
Oh, I see it. I think it might have been the public hearing for the scenic road permit on Maple Street.
Yeah, that's got,
That is Mr. Devine twice. I did, and Mr. Dyer once.
I think you're wrong.
I'm sorry?
I think you had them all.
I think he did.
Yeah. Anyway, that was the only thing I saw. I think we're good there. If you change
Okay.
that over.
Entertain a motion
I am.
to accept the minutes as written with the amendments of proper names. Do I have a second?
Second.
We have a motion on the floor, has been seconded. Any discussion? Call for the vote.
Brian, I.
Bill, aye. The motion passes unanimously.
Excellent. That one item that you were mentioning on March 13th, so the agenda right now is 3 items. It is 180 Payne Street. That one is still go for March 13th. That is New England Country Club. The other two items are the two Hartford Ave projects for the Meehan property ones. So just to be aware, and I'm glad I'm saying this because this is recorded and it'll go to the public. My understanding is that, so they did notify abutters and put in the legal ad for March 13th. However, the applicant has a conflict, so they're going to be requesting a continuance as of right now to April 10th. So those two items are going to be pushed. And the applicant's gonna be working with the abutter notices to make sure that, you know, the abutters are already notified, which was very frustrating that happened. I mean, it was unforeseen, so I can't blame the applicant, but the applicant did mention that they want to notify the abutters with the second mailing, just saying that, hey, FYI, due to unforeseen circumstances, we gotta move this to April 10th, just so they're aware. But, that, I just wanted to mention that. So the March 13th will look like it's a very, very packed meeting, but really it's this very substantial one. And then two approvals, hopefully,
And two continuances.
and two continuances, correct?
So,
Technically, they have to be on the agenda because they're there.
Correct, yep,
So the renotices are gonna go out soon?
yes, yep. Yeah, I haven't received any calls from the office for really any of these items, and everything's up on the website now, so we'll see what happens, but,
Can I ask, so we received, your office has received a development plan? And what else? There's no special permit, right? Or is there a special permit
for,
for the Hartford Avenue?
yes, that
13?
that is a special permit
So
through
there's a
the
special
adaptive
permit
use
for the
overlay
adaptive use
district.
Overlay district.
Yep.
Is it just a special permit or is it
It's a special permit and development plan,
and development plan?
Yep.
Stormwater?
and stormwater permit, yeah, yep.
Okay.
Those are the three.
Thank you.
Is there opaque fencing?
There's a lot of buffering, so you'll see. Take a look at the
As long as
plans.
it's opaque.
Yeah. There you go.
New
All
right
right.
for the day?
Yeah.
And then entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second. Any discussion? I need to do a call for the vote, we just all know in our heads. Motion passes unanimously.
All right. Have a good night, Bellingham.
Good night, Bellingham.